The day I discovered my husband's signature on those papers, I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Family businesses are built on trust, but what happens when that trust is shattered by the people closest to you? I'm Megan Foster, and this is the story of how I almost lost everything my family built over 3 decades, all because of a contract my husband signed without reading, and a brother-in-law who saw our legacy as nothing more than a stepping stone to his ambitions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I always knew where I stood in the Mitchell family hierarchy. Despite being the one who spent weekends at the workshop with my father as a child, who studied sustainable business practices in college, and who came back to work in the family business, right after graduation, I was never quite the star. That honor went to my husband's brother, Eric Wilson. "Megan, did you see the new sales figures?" my father Robert asked, barely glancing up from his laptop as I walked into his office carrying the quarterly projections I'd stayed up half the night finalizing. "Eric's online marketing strategy is really paying off." "I did," I replied, setting the folder on his desk. "But have you looked at the customer return rates on those quick ship items? We're seeing a 15% increase in quality complaints." He waved a dismissive hand. "Growing pains. You can't expand without a few bumps." That was the rhythm of life at Mitchell's Fine Furniture. Founded by my father 35 years ago in our garage, it had grown into Portland's premier custom furniture business, known for quality craftsmanship and timeless Pacific Northwest style. Our pieces weren't just furniture. They were heirlooms, investments passed down through generations. At least that's what they used to be. 3 years ago, my husband Daniel's brother Eric joined the company after his tech startup fizzled. With his MBA and charismatic smile, he quickly charmed my father. "The future is digital, Bob," he'd say, slapping my father on the back like they were old college buddies instead of in-laws. "We need to streamline production, boost online presence, create an experience." Experience, as if the generations of craftsmanship that went into our furniture wasn't experience enough. I left my father's office and headed to the workshop. The factory floor was my sanctuary, filled with the comforting scents of sawdust and linseed oil. This was where the real magic happened, where rough lumber was transformed into pieces of art by craftspeople who had been with us for decades. Carlos, our master woodworker, looked up from the cherry dining table he was hand-finishing. "Hey, Megan, the new specs come through for the Henderson order?" "Not yet. Eric's team is still finalizing the design language," I said, making air quotes. Carlos shook his head. "Customers who spend $6,000 on a dining table don't want language. They want quality." I ran my hand over the satiny surface of the table. This was what Mitchell's was about. Not scaling up production to compete with mass manufacturers, not chasing trends that would look dated in 5 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dinner at my parents' tonight, 7 p.m. Eric has big news." I sighed. Another dinner where Eric would monopolize the conversation, with his grand plans while my father nodded approvingly. Daniel would sit quietly supportive beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand under the table when Eric's boasting became too much. My mother, Patricia, would try to steer conversation to neutral ground, asking about everyone's week with deliberate even-handedness, and I would smile and nod and bite my tongue. But tonight was different. As I pulled into the driveway of my parents' West Hills home, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury car parked out front. Inside, the dining room had been set with the good china, and there was a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "Megan!" Eric's voice boomed across the foyer as I walked in. He swept over, pulling me into a cologne-drenched hug. "Just the woman I wanted to see." "Where's Daniel?" "Parking the car," I said, extracting myself. "What's the occasion?" "You'll see," he winked, turning to introduce me to a man in an expensive suit. Megan, this is Jason Keller, my old college roommate. He's with Lux Home Furnishings now. I felt a chill run down my spine. Lux was a national conglomerate known for buying small furniture companies, stripping their operations, and outsourcing production overseas while keeping the original branding. They were everything Mitchell's stood against. "Nice to meet you," I said, my voice neutral. "I didn't realize we were having company tonight." "Jason's not company," Eric laughed. "He's practically family now." Before I could ask what that meant, Daniel appeared at my side, kissing my cheek. "Sorry I'm late. Had to take a call from that client in Seattle." "Well, now that everyone's here," my father announced, "let's get some champagne poured. We're celebrating." We gathered around the dining table, crystal flutes filled with bubbling champagne. My mother passed around her famous pot roast, a dish she reserved for special occasions. Eric remained standing, Jason beside him with a portfolio tucked under his arm. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," Eric began, raising his glass. "Especially you, Megan. I know how much Mitchell's means to you, which is why I'm so excited to share this news." My stomach tightened. For the past 6 months, I've been in talks with Lux Home Furnishings about a partnership opportunity that will take Mitchell's to the national stage. "Partnership?" I repeated, looking to my father. His face was glowing with pride. "More of an acquisition, actually," Jason cut in smoothly. "But the Mitchell name and legacy will remain front and center in our marketing." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Acquisition? Dad? You're selling the business?" My father cleared his throat. "Not selling, Megan. Strategic repositioning. Eric's arranged for us to maintain creative control while Lux handles the business side. It's the best of both worlds. Lux is prepared to offer $8 million for a full buyout," Jason said, sliding the portfolio toward my father, "with positions on the board for both Robert and Eric to ensure the Mitchell vision continues." "What about the workshop? Our employees?" I asked, my voice rising. "Some of them have been with us for 20 years. Manufacturing will be consolidated with Lux's existing operations," Eric explained. "More efficient that way, but we'll maintain a small custom shop for showcase pieces." "You mean for show," I said flatly, "so customers can believe they're still buying Mitchell quality while actually getting mass-produced furniture?" "Megan," my father warned. "It's a fair question," Jason said smoothly. "And yes, some production will move to our facilities in Asia, but only to make the price point more accessible. The high-end custom pieces will still be made locally." I turned to Daniel, expecting to see the same shock and betrayal I felt. Instead, he was studying his plate. "Daniel?" I prompted. "You're awfully quiet." He looked up, a flash of guilt, crossing his face. "I may have heard some of this before." "Some?" Eric laughed. "Danny boy here has been instrumental. He's been helping me pull together all the financial projections Lux needed." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. "You knew about this? For how long?" "A few weeks," Daniel admitted. "Eric asked me to look over some numbers, and it just progressed from there." "A few weeks?" I repeated. "And you didn't think to mention this to your wife? To the person who has dedicated her entire career to this company?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I thought it would be better coming from everyone together," Daniel said weakly. "Well, there's a bit more to it," Eric continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "The deal is actually contingent on maintaining certain management structures, and Lux is particularly interested in our digital strategy moving forward." "Meaning?" I prompted. "Meaning Eric will be taking on the role of CEO for the Mitchells." "Brand under the Lux umbrella," my father said proudly. "And I'll be stepping back to an advisory role." "What about me?" The question hung in the air. 5 pairs of eyes avoided meeting mine. "We value your passion for the craftsmanship side, Megan," Jason finally said. "There would certainly be A position for you in product development. Under Eric's direction, of course. Under Eric's direction. After 15 years of working my way up, learning every aspect of the business, I was being offered a subordinate position to someone who had been with the company for 3 years and saw our furniture as nothing more than units to be scaled. "This isn't final yet, is it?" I asked, looking directly at my father. "Tell me you haven't signed anything." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we've signed a letter of intent, but the final contracts are still being drawn up." I stood up abruptly. I need some air. Outside on the patio, I gulped in the cool evening air, trying to process what had just happened. The garden lights illuminated the handcrafted cedar Adirondack chairs my father and I had built together when I was 16. He'd taught me about selecting the right wood, about precision and patience. "Quality isn't just what you see, Meggie," he'd said. "It's what you don't see. It's doing the right thing even when no one's looking." What had happened to that man? The sliding door opened, and my mother stepped out, wrapping a cardigan around her shoulders against the evening chill. "They could have at least told me," I said before she could speak. "Before inviting some corporate suit to dinner." She sighed, sitting in one of the cedar chairs. "I didn't know either, until yesterday. Your father seems to think it's for the best, that the business is getting too big for us to manage alone." "Too big? Or not big enough for Eric's ambitions?" I sat beside her. "Mom, everything Dad built, everything I thought I would someday lead, they're just going to sell it to some conglomerate that will slap our name on imported knockoffs." She was quiet for a moment. "Have you looked at the company finances recently? The real numbers, not the ones in the quarterly reports?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I overheard your father and Eric arguing last week. Something about a loan coming due, a big one." This was news to me. As operations manager, I should have known about any significant debt. "What loan?" "I don't know the details." But Robert seemed worried, and Eric was reassuring him that this Lux deal would solve everything. A piece clicked into place. Eric's eagerness to sell suddenly made more sense. But why would my father take out a loan large enough to threaten the business without telling me? The sliding door opened again, and Daniel stepped out. My mother patted my knee and stood. "I'll leave you two to talk." When she'd gone, Daniel sat beside me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm sorry, Meg, I should have told you." "Yes, you should have." I couldn't look at him. "Why didn't you?" He sighed. "At first it was just Eric asking for help with some projections. Then he mentioned Lux was interested, but I thought it was preliminary. By the time I realized how serious it was, he'd convinced your dad it was the only way forward." "The only way forward for what? Since when is Mitchell's in financial trouble?" Daniel hesitated. "I'm not supposed to say anything, but there's been some cash flow issues. That new production line Eric pushed for last year, it cost more than expected, and the returns haven't materialized yet." The production line I'd advised against, the one that prioritized quantity over quality. So rather than admit his mistake, Eric's solution is to sell the entire company? It's not that simple, Meg. Lux is offering security, a guaranteed future. For who? Not for our employees, not for our customers who trust us to maintain certain standards. I finally turned to look at him. Not for me. He had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't think about it that way. I just saw the numbers, and they made sense. Some things matter more than numbers, Daniel. Inside, I could see Eric gesturing animatedly while Jason nodded, my father hanging on their every word. This wasn't just about business. This was about legacy, about values, about what it meant to put your name on something and stand behind it. I stood up. "I'm going back to the office. I need to see these financial records myself." "Now? It's almost 9. "Yes, now. Are you coming or not? Daniel hesitated, glancing back at the dining room. I should probably stay. Make our excuses. Fine. I pulled out my car keys. Tell them whatever you want. The drive to our downtown showroom was a blur of anger and betrayal. How could my father consider selling the company without even discussing it with me? How could Daniel keep this from me? And how had Eric, in just 3 years, managed to position himself to take over everything my family had built? The showroom was dark when I arrived, the display furniture casting long shadows in the streetlight filtering through the windows. I bypassed it and headed upstairs to the offices. My father's door was locked, but I knew where the spare key was hidden. Inside, his office was impeccably neat, as always. I went straight to his computer, but it was password protected. The filing cabinets were my next target. Most contained information I already had access to: customer orders, supplier contracts, employee records. But in the bottom drawer of the cabinet behind his desk, I found a folder labeled Expansion Financing that I'd never seen before. Inside were loan documents for $3 million from First Western Bank, dated 18 months ago, around the time Eric had started pushing for expanded production. The loan was secured by the business assets and my parents' home. The terms were aggressive, with a balloon payment of $1, $8 million due in just 3 months. No wonder my father was eager for Lux's $8 million offer. But something else caught my eye. The loan application listed Eric Wilson as co-owner and chief financial officer of Mitchell's Fine Furniture. Co-owner? Eric didn't own any part of the business, or at least he hadn't when I last reviewed our corporate structure. I dug deeper and found another folder labeled Restructuring. Inside was a document that made my blood run cold. A transfer of ownership shares, signed 2 years ago, giving Eric a 30% stake in the company. The signatures at the bottom were my father's, Eric's, and my hands began to shake, Daniel's. My husband had signed over a portion of my family's business to his brother without ever mentioning it to me. I sat back in my father's chair, the document spread before me, trying to make sense of it all. Why would Daniel sign such a thing? And how could Eric have become CFO without my knowledge? As operations manager, I worked with our accounting department daily. This made no sense. Unless... I pulled out my phone and called Henry Chen, my father's longtime friend and the company's outside accountant. Megan, it's a bit late for bookkeeping. Questions, he answered, his voice warm despite the hour. Henry, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Has Eric been handling financial decisions for Mitchell's? There was a long pause. I assumed you knew. About 2 years ago, your father restructured the management team. Eric took over the financial side, and I was asked to work with him directly, rather than going through the regular accounting department. And Daniel? What was his role in this? Another pause. Daniel signed as a witness, I believe, for the transfer of shares. So, Daniel hadn't just kept this from me. He'd actively participated in cutting me out of my own family business. Thank you, Henry. I'm sorry for calling so late. Megan, is everything all right? You sound upset. No, I admitted. Everything is not all right, but it will be. I hung up and continued searching. In another folder, I found projections for the company under Lux's ownership. The production staff would be cut by 80% within 6 months. The Portland showroom would become a design center with minimal inventory, while actual sales would be driven to Lux's big box stores. The Mitchell name would become just another brand in their portfolio, with none of the craftsmanship or quality that had defined us for decades. And buried in the fine print of the letter of intent with Lux was a clause stating that all current employees, including family members, would be subject to review and potential termination with no severance after the 3-month transition. Period. They weren't just selling the company, they were setting me up to be pushed out entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Where are you? Everyone's worried." I didn't respond. Instead, I took photos of every document I'd found and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I called Vanessa Delgado, my best friend since college, and now a corporate attorney. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "And I need it now." The next morning I arrived at the workshop before anyone else. Carlos showed up at 6:30, as he had every workday for the past 22 years. "You're here early," he remarked, hanging up his jacket. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "But I'm working on it. Can you gather everyone for a meeting at 8? And keep it quiet. Just shop floor staff, not management." He studied my face. "This about those suits who were here last week? The ones Eric was showing around?" "You could say that." At 8 o'clock, the 15 members of our production team gathered in the break room. These were the heart and soul of Mitchell's, the craftspeople who transformed raw wood into art. "I'll get right to the point," I said, closing the door. "Mitchell's is being sold to Lux Home Furnishings. The deal isn't final yet, but if it goes through, most of you will lose your jobs within 6 months." A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a burst of questions and exclamations. "Is this for real? But Mr. Mitchell always said he'd never sell." "What about our benefits? My kid's about to start college." I held up my hands. "I only found out last night, and I'm as angry as you are." My father, along with my husband and brother-in-law, have been planning this behind my back. But I'm not going to let it happen without a fight. "What can we do?" Carlos asked. "If the owners want to sell, they can sell." "That's just it," I said. "I'm not convinced the ownership structure they're presenting is legitimate. I need time to investigate, but meanwhile, I need all of you to continue working as normal. Don't let Eric or my father know that you know." "You're asking us to pretend everything's fine while they plan to ship our jobs overseas?" one of the newer craftsmen asked skeptically. "I'm asking you to trust me," I replied. "The way I've trusted all of you to uphold the Mitchell standard of quality all these years. Give me 2 weeks. If I can't stop this by then, I'll help every one of you find new positions elsewhere, even if I have to start a new company to do it." Carlos stood up. "I'm with Megan. She's always had our backs. Time we had hers." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. As they filed out to start their workday, my phone buzzed again. Daniel had called 6 times since last night. I'd slept on Vanessa's couch, needing space to think. Now he was calling again. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I've been worried sick. Your father's called a meeting at 10 and he expects everyone there." "I'll be there," I said coolly. "Wouldn't want to miss another family decision I have no say in." "Megan, please, let me explain." "Save it for the meeting, Daniel. I think it's time everyone's cards were on the table, don't you?" I hung up and called Vanessa. "It's time. Bring everything we discussed." At precisely 10 o'clock, I walked into the conference room at our corporate offices. My father sat at the head of the table, with Eric to his right and Jason from Lux beside him. Daniel was on my father's left, looking haggard. My mother sat quietly in the corner, her face drawn, with worry. "Megan," my father began, "we missed you at the end of dinner last night. Daniel said you weren't feeling well." "I'm feeling fine," I replied, taking a seat directly opposite Eric. "Just doing some late-night reading. Financial documents, ownership, transfers, fascinating stuff." Eric's smile faltered slightly. "Excited about the Lux opportunity, then? I knew you'd come around once you had time to think about it." "Oh, I've thought about it. I've thought about a lot of things." I placed my portfolio on the table. Like how my brother-in-law somehow acquired a 30% stake in my family's company without my knowledge, or how my husband signed as a witness to this transaction without ever mentioning it to me. Daniel flinched. My father's face hardened. "Business decisions aren't always family discussions, Megan," he said. Eric brought capital we needed for expansion, and in return, he received equity. It's standard practice. Is it standard practice to appoint someone CFO without informing your operations manager? To take out multi-million-dollar loans secured by business assets without proper corporate approval? Jason cleared his throat. Perhaps I should step out while the family discusses these matters. Please stay, I said. Since you're buying our company, you should know exactly what you're getting into. The door opened, and Vanessa walked in, briefcase in hand. Sorry I'm late. Traffic on the bridge was terrible. Who is this? My father demanded. Vanessa Delgado, corporate counsel, she said smoothly, taking the seat beside me. I'm here representing Megan's interests in this matter. This is a private family meeting, Eric snapped. We don't need outside counsel. Actually, you do, Vanessa replied, opening her briefcase. Because the ownership transfer Mr. Mitchell signed 2 years ago violates multiple provisions of your corporate bylaws, which explicitly state that shares can only be transferred to direct descendants unless approved by a unanimous vote of all existing shareholders. I am the majority shareholder, my father said, his voice rising. I can transfer my shares as I see fit. Not according to your own bylaws, Vanessa countered, sliding a document across the table. And certainly not without informing all officers of the corporation, which includes Megan as operations manager. This is ridiculous, Eric scoffed. I brought capital the company desperately needed. Without me, Mitchell's would have folded 2 years ago. Is that so? I opened my portfolio and pulled out a stack of financial reports. Because according to these records, which I obtained from our bank this morning, Mitchell's was profitable until 18 months ago, when suddenly, large sums began being transferred to a consulting company called Wilson Innovations, a company that coincidentally lists Eric Wilson as its sole proprietor. The blood drained from Eric's face. My father looked confused. What is she talking about? He asked Eric. Nothing, Eric said quickly. Just the consulting fees we discussed for the expansion strategy. $800,000 in consulting fees? I pressed. For what exactly? And why did you need a $3 million loan when our books showed $1? $5 million in cash reserves 2 years ago. The room went silent. Jason from Lux was watching the exchange with growing discomfort. Dad, I said, softening my tone. Did you even read the documents Eric had you sign? Did you look at the real numbers, or did you just trust him because he's family? Because he presented himself as the savior of the business you built? My father's confident demeanor began to crack. Eric explained that we needed capital for expansion, that modernizing our operations was essential for survival. And the loan? The one that puts your house at risk if it's not paid in 3 months? He looked genuinely confused. What loan? The bank extended our existing line of credit, but there's no balloon payment. I slid the loan document across the table. This loan, signed by you and Eric 18 months ago. My father put on his reading glasses and examined the document, his face growing increasingly pale. I never signed this. This isn't my signature. All eyes turned to Eric, who had gone very still. Eric? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? Nothing illegal, Eric said defensively. I was trying to save this company from itself. You're all so caught up in tradition and craftsmanship that you can't see the market is changing. We needed to scale up, to modernize. So you forged Dad's signature on a loan document? I asked incredulously, and then started draining the company through fake consulting fees to create a financial crisis that would force us to sell to Lux? It wasn't like that, Eric insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Jason stood up. I think Lux will need to reevaluate this acquisition in light of these irregularities. If there are questions about the legitimacy of the ownership structure or potential financial improprieties. Wait, Eric said desperately. The deal is solid. Mitchell's is still a valuable brand, regardless of these misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I repeated. Is that what you call fraud now? My father seemed to age 10 years in an instant. Eric, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't forge my signature and steal from the company. Eric's silence was answer enough. I think, Vanessa said into the heavy quiet, that we should adjourn this meeting so that the Mitchell family can discuss next steps privately. Mr. Keller, I'll walk you out. As Jason and Vanessa left, my father buried his face in his hands. My mother moved to stand behind him, her hand on his shoulder. I trusted you, my father said, looking up at Eric. I welcomed you into this business, into our family. I was trying to help, Eric insisted. The old way of doing things isn't sustainable. Lux was offering a way out for everyone. A way out? I countered. Or a way up for you? CEO of the Mitchell brand, while the rest of us are pushed aside and our employees lose their jobs? Daniel, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Did you know about this from the beginning? When you asked me to sign those papers? Eric hesitated just a moment too long. You did, Daniel said, his voice hollow. You played me. You played all of us. Daniel, you don't understand, Eric began. No, I understand perfectly now, Daniel cut him off. You manipulated me into betraying my wife. You lied to our father-in-law. You committed fraud. And for what? A corner office at Lux? Eric stood up abruptly. This isn't over. I own 30% of this company. Actually, I said, according to our corporate counsel, you don't. And I think the police will be very interested in those forged loan documents. You wouldn't, Eric challenged. Not to family. I met his gaze steadily. You stopped being family the moment you decided to destroy everything we built. The door closed behind Eric with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. Megan, my father said, his voice shaking. I don't know what to say. I was so focused on the future of the business, on creating a legacy that would last. I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. It's not just your fault, Dad, I said, the anger draining out of me, leaving only exhaustion. We all got comfortable. We stopped questioning, stopped paying attention to the details. Not all of us, my mother said quietly. You tried to warn us about the quality issues, about rushing expansion. We should have listened. Daniel reached for my hand across the table. I let him take it, though I couldn't quite meet his eyes yet. I'm so sorry, Meg, he said. I never read the documents Eric asked me to sign. I just trusted him when he said it was routine, that your dad had already approved everything. I should have shown them to you, at the very least. Yes, I agreed. You should have. What happens now? My father asked. The loan is still due in 3 months, forged or not. The bank has our assets as collateral. I pulled another document from my portfolio. Vanessa and I worked on this all night. It's a plan to restructure the company, streamline operations, without sacrificing quality, and refinance the debt through a different bank. We'll have to tighten our belts for a while, but Mitchell's fine furniture can survive this. It can thrive again. My father took the document, scanning the first page. You did all this overnight? Some of us actually read the papers we're handed, I said, allowing a small smile. And I've been thinking about ways to modernize while maintaining our standards for years. You just never asked. He looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in years. I'm asking now. My mother squeezed his shoulder. We both are. Daniel was still holding my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Meg, I know I've broken your trust. I'll do whatever it takes to earn it back. I finally met his eyes. There was genuine remorse there, and something else. Pride, maybe. Not the blind pride my father had shown in Eric, but a deeper appreciation for who I was and what I could do. It's going to take time, I told him, for all of us to rebuild what's been broken here. We have time, my father said, straightening his shoulders. And we have each other. He looked at the restructuring plan again. This is good work, Megan. Really good work. I had a good teacher, I replied. You always said quality isn't just what you see, it's what you don't see. It's doing the right thing even when no one's looking. He nodded, eyes glistening. I did say that, didn't I? I should have remembered it myself. The door opened, and Vanessa returned. Jason Keller is officially withdrawing Lux's offer, she announced. He mentioned something about ethics and family values not aligning with their corporate culture. Their loss, my mother said firmly. And there's something else, Vanessa continued, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I've been contacted by 3 of Lux's former acquisition targets, small furniture makers like Mitchell's, who were pressured to sell when they experienced sudden financial difficulties. It seems Eric may have run this same scheme before. Daniel looked stricken. What will happen to him? That depends, I said, on whether these other companies want to press charges, and whether we do. My father sighed heavily. He needs to face consequences, but he's still family. Let's take it one day at a time, my mother suggested. First, we save the business. Then we figure out how to save the family. I gathered. My documents, suddenly eager to get back to the workshop, to the familiar sense of wood and varnish, to the craftspeople who were the true heart of Mitchell's. I told the production team this morning, I admitted, about the potential sale. They're all waiting to hear what happens next. Then let's go tell them together, my father said, standing up. It's time they heard from all of us. As we walked toward the workshop, my father put his arm around my shoulders. You know, Meggie, I always thought I was building this business for someone who would love it as much as I do. I just didn't realize that someone was already here. The workshop door opened, and Carlos looked out, his face anxious. Behind him, the entire production team had stopped working, waiting. It's okay, I called out. Mitchell's fine furniture isn't going anywhere, and neither are we. The relief that broke across their faces was worth every painful revelation, every difficult conversation that lay ahead. This was what mattered. The people, the craft, the integrity of what we built together. Mitchell's wasn't just wood and nails and fabric. It was trust. It was legacy. It was family, in the truest sense of the word. And families, like the finest furniture, could be repaired, restored, and made stronger at the broken places. The morning. After our confrontation, I arrived at Mitchell's before sunrise. The showroom was quiet, display pieces catching the first hint of dawn through the windows. My sanctuary, nearly stolen from under me. I ran my hand along the edge of a walnut dining table, feeling the perfect smoothness that only came from hours of careful sanding and finishing. This was what we stood for. This attention to detail, this commitment to quality that couldn't be replicated in some overseas factory. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Police want statement by noon. How do you want to proceed? The question weighed heavily. Pressing charges against Eric meant publicly airing our family's dirty laundry, potentially damaging the Mitchell brand just when we needed customer confidence the most. Not pressing charges meant he might never face real consequences for what he'd done. Before I could respond, the workshop door opened, and Carlos walked in, surprised to see me standing alone in the dim light. Thought I was the first one in today, he said, hanging up his jacket. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. He nodded, understanding without needing explanation. The others are coming in early, too. We want to get that Henderson order finished ahead of schedule. Show everybody Mitchell's isn't going anywhere. His quiet loyalty brought a lump to my throat. Thank you. As Carlos headed to his workstation, my father appeared at the showroom entrance, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally impeccable clothes seemed hastily chosen. "You're here early," he said. "So are you." He walked over, running his hand along the same table I had touched moments before. "Your grandfather made this design. Did you know that? One of the first pieces Mitchell's ever sold." I hadn't known. My grandfather had died when I was young, his influence on the business a story told rather than a memory lived. "When we started, it was just him and me in a garage workshop," my father continued. "Every night, my hands would be so sore I could barely hold a fork at dinner." But he insisted on perfection. "People are inviting our work into their homes," he'd say. "Into the places where they make memories with their families. We owe them our best." The weight of that legacy hung in the air between us. "I failed him," my father said quietly. "And I failed you." "Dad, no, let me finish." I was so focused on growth, on not being the one who let Mitchell's fade away, that I lost sight of what made us special in the first place. He met my eyes directly, and I was blind to who really carried that vision forward. The silence stretched between us, decades of unspoken feelings rising to the surface. "I'm pressing charges against Eric," he finally said. "The detective is coming. At 10. I wanted you to know." The decision surprised me. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know." "Everyone should know," he said firmly. "That's not just about protecting the business. It's about integrity, about standing behind our name." The workshop was coming alive behind us, the familiar sounds of tools being prepared, machines humming. To life, craftspeople calling greetings to each other. "What about Daniel?" I asked. "He signed those documents too." My father's expression softened. Daniel was manipulated. He made a mistake, a serious one, but he didn't act with malice. Eric did. "I'm not sure I can forgive him," I admitted. "Not yet." "That's your decision to make, but don't make it today, when everything's still raw." He squeezed my shoulder. "Your grandfather also used to say that good wood needs time to season. So do good decisions." The showroom door chimed, and we both turned to see Daniel walk in, carrying 2 coffee cups. He looked as though he hadn't slept either. "I'll be in my office," my father said tactfully, leaving us alone. Daniel approached cautiously, offering one of the cups. "Vanilla latte? Extra shot. Still your favorite?" I accepted the peace offering, the familiar warmth of the cup comforting against my palms. "Thanks." "I didn't know if you'd be here or at home," he said. "I didn't know if you were coming home at all." "I stayed at Vanessa's." I took a sip of the coffee, buying time to organize my thoughts. I needed space to think. He nodded, eyes downcast. "I deserve that. I deserve worse." "Why did you do it, Daniel? Really? After 10 years together, how could you keep something this important from me?" He sank onto a nearby ottoman, coffee forgotten in his hands. "It started small. 2 years ago, Eric asked me to look over some expansion plans he wanted to present to your father. Nothing unusual. We'd collaborated on projects before. But it didn't stay small. No." He set his cup down, leaning forward with elbows on knees. "The plans were ambitious. Too ambitious, I thought. But Eric was so convinced they were necessary for Mitchell's survival. He had charts, market analyses, projections showing how traditional furniture makers were being squeezed out by mass manufacturers. And you believed him." I raised concerns. He had answers for everything, and then he mentioned he was putting his own money into the company to fund the expansion. He made it sound like he was saving the family business. So when he asked you to witness the documents, I thought I was helping secure Mitchell's future. He said your father had already reviewed everything, that it was just formality. Daniel looked up, meeting my eyes. I should have read every word. I should have talked to you directly. There's no excuse. The raw honesty in his voice made it harder to maintain my anger, but the hurt remained. You chose him over me. No, Daniel said quickly. Never. I thought I was choosing what was best for Mitchell's, which meant what was best for you. I was wrong, catastrophically wrong, but I never intended to betray you. The workshop door opened, and Carlos poked his head into the showroom. Megan, there's someone here asking for you. Says he's from First Western Bank. Daniel and I exchanged glances, the bank holding the fraudulent loan. I'll be right there, I said, setting down my coffee. To Daniel, I added, we're not done with this conversation. I know, he replied. I'll be here when you're ready to continue it. The bank representative was a serious young man in a pressed suit, looking out of place amid the sawdust and machinery of the workshop. He introduced himself as Andrew Reeves, Special Investigations Unit. We received some concerning documentation this morning, he said, once we were seated in the conference room. Apparently from your brother-in-law, Eric Wilson. My stomach tightened. What kind of documentation? He placed a folder on the table. Emails between himself and your husband, Daniel Foster, discussing the terms of the loan and the planned sale to Lux Furnishings. Mr. Wilson claims these prove your husband was fully aware of all financial arrangements. I opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be email exchanges between Eric and Daniel spanning the past 2 years. In them, Daniel seemed not just aware of Eric's schemes but an active participant, discussing ways to overstate expenses, hide cash flow issues from me, and position the company for a profitable exit via acquisition. These are forgeries, I said immediately, though doubt had already taken root. Daniel wouldn't do this. Andrew's expression remained neutral. They came from Mr. Wilson's business server. The timestamps and header information appear legitimate. Eric is trying to drag Daniel down with him, I insisted. He's already forged my father's signature on loan documents. This is just more of the same. We'll need to investigate thoroughly, of course, but given the nature of these allegations and the loan's irregular status, I need to inform you that First Western will be freezing all Mitchell's business accounts pending resolution. The impact of his words hit me like a physical blow. You can't do that. We have payroll due next week. Vendor payments. We're in the middle of reorganizing specifically to address the issues Eric created. I understand this is difficult, Ms. Foster, but bank policy in cases of potential fraud is quite clear. Until we determine who authorized what, all assets must be secured. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, the forged emails spread before me. They were convincingly crafted, with details about projects and conversations that only someone close to the company would know. If I didn't know Daniel so well, I might have believed them myself. The door opened, and my mother entered, looking concerned. Your father told me the bank was here. How bad is it? They've frozen our accounts, I said, pushing the emails toward her, and Eric's not going down without a fight. She scanned the documents, her face hardening. That manipulative little. He never did know how to lose gracefully. What if they're real, Mom? What if Daniel was in on it the whole time? The question that had been gnawing at me finally escaped. She sat beside me, taking my hand. Do you really believe that? After everything you two have built together? I thought of Daniel's face this morning, the genuine remorse in his eyes. No, but I didn't believe Eric could do what he did either. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken, she acknowledged. But if anyone deserves the benefit of the doubt, it's Daniel. Eric, on the other hand. She tapped the emails. This reeks of desperation. The bank doesn't see it that way. Without access to our accounts, we can't pay anyone. We can't order materials. We're dead in the water. My mother straightened, a determined glint in her eye I hadn't seen in years. Not necessarily. Your father and I still have our personal accounts. And my retirement fund. It's not millions, but it would cover payroll for a few weeks at least. Mom, no, that's your security. Mitchell's is our security, she corrected. It's our legacy. And legacy isn't just about the past. It's about the future we're building. She squeezed my hand. You've shown us you're willing to fight for this company. Now, let us fight alongside you. Before I could respond, Vanessa burst into the room, slightly breathless. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this right away. She placed her tablet on the table, displaying a business news website. The headline made my blood run cold. Luxury furniture brand Mitchell's faces fraud investigation. Insiders claim financial irregularities. It just posted 10 minutes ago, Vanessa explained. Eric must have contacted the press. I skimmed the article, which quoted anonymous sources close to the company, alleging systematic financial mismanagement at Mitchell's, including inflated sales figures, quality control issues, and impending bankruptcy. He's trying to tank our reputation, I realized. If he can't profit from Mitchell's, he'd rather see it destroyed. It gets worse. Vanessa swiped to another screen. Lux just issued a statement distancing themselves from any acquisition talks, saying they conduct thorough due diligence and would never consider purchasing a company with such problematic practices. The walls seemed to close in around me. In less than 24 hours, we'd gone from a respected furniture maker with a solid reputation to a company under fraud investigation with frozen accounts and public accusations of dishonesty. We need to respond, my mother said firmly. Set the record straight. With what evidence? I countered. The bank already thinks Daniel was complicit. The press will assume we're just doing damage control. Vanessa tucked her tablet away. Actually, there might be a way to prove those emails are forgeries. Daniel's emails go through the company server, right? Even ones he sends from home or his phone? I nodded. We set it up that way for continuity when people are traveling or working remotely. Then the server logs would show if those exact emails were ever actually sent or received. Email headers can be faked, but server logs are much harder to manipulate, especially if you don't have direct access to the server. A spark of hope ignited. Our IT support is outsourced to TechCore. They maintain daily backups of all system data. Let me call them, Vanessa offered. As your legal counsel, I can request an emergency data preservation order. As she stepped out to make the call, my mother gave me a questioning look. What can I do? I thought for a moment. Call the craftspeople who've left over the years, the ones who started their own studios or went to work for other companies. See if any of them would be willing to publicly vouch for Mitchell's integrity and quality standards. She nodded, already pulling out her phone. Consider it done. Left alone, I turned back to the forged emails, studying them more carefully. Something about the writing style nagged at me. The Daniel in these exchanges used certain phrases, certain rhythms of speech that didn't quite ring true. My husband was methodical, precise in his communication. These emails had a subtle undertone of flamboyance that reminded me more of. The door opened again, and my father entered with Carlos. We just saw the news, my father said grimly. The whole workshop knows. How are they taking it? I asked. Carlos stepped forward. That's what I came to tell you. Nobody's leaving. We all know this is Eric's doing, not Mitchell's. But if we can't process payroll, we'll wait, he said simply. Everyone agreed. Mitchell's has always treated us fairly. We can carry the company for a while until this gets sorted out. The loyalty brought tears to my eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep fighting, Carlos replied, because we're fighting with you. My father cleared his throat, visibly moved. We don't deserve this kind of loyalty. Sure you do, Carlos countered. For 22 years, you've treated us like family, not just employees. Family sticks together when things get tough. Family. The word resonated painfully after Eric's betrayal. But looking at Carlos, at my parents, I was reminded that family wasn't just about blood or marriage. It was about choice, about showing up, about standing together when it mattered most. The conference room began filling with others. Vanessa, returning from her call, Henry Chen arriving with financial records, Daniel hovering uncertainly in the doorway. The room hummed with purposeful energy as people started making calls, reviewing documents, drafting statements. I caught Daniel's eye and nodded slightly, inviting him in. He moved to a corner, not presuming to take a central role but clearly, ready to help however needed. TechCore is already working on the server logs, Vanessa announced. They should have something for us by end of day. I've contacted the bank's regional director, Henry added. He's a personal friend. He can't override the freeze entirely, but he might be able to create exceptions for critical operations like payroll. My mother hung up from a call, smiling triumphantly. Martin Sawyer and Judith Kim both agreed to make public statements supporting Mitchell's. They've already posted on their professional social media accounts. Martin and Judith were renowned furniture makers who had apprenticed at Mitchell's years ago. Their endorsement carried significant weight in the industry. What about the police? I asked my father. Are they still coming at 10? He checked his watch. Any minute now. But I'm not sure pressing charges is our priority right now, given everything else. It absolutely is, I insisted. Eric needs to be held accountable legally, not just professionally. Otherwise, he could do this to someone else. Daniel spoke up from his corner. I agree with Megan, and I want to give a full statement too, about my involvement, or rather, how Eric manipulated my involvement. All eyes turned to him. The room went quiet. Are you sure? I asked. Once it's on record. I'm sure, he said firmly. I made a terrible mistake trusting Eric, but I never knowingly participated in fraud. Those emails are forgeries, and I'll swear to that under oath if necessary. As if on cue, the showroom bell chimed, and the receptionist appeared in the doorway. Detective Chen is here. The next hour passed in a blur of formal statements, evidence presentation, and legal terminology. Detective Sarah Chen was thorough, but compassionate, clearly distinguishing between Eric's deliberate fraud and Daniel's unwitting participation. Based on what you've shown me, we have grounds to pursue charges against Eric Wilson for forgery, fraud, and embezzlement, she concluded. As for Mr. Foster, his level of culpability will depend on what the evidence shows about his knowledge and intent. The server logs will clear him, I said with more confidence than I felt. She nodded. Let's hope so. In the meantime, I'm going to seek a warrant to search Mr. Wilson's residence and office. Is there anything specific we should be looking for? His laptop, Daniel suggested. If he fabricated those emails, he probably did it there. And any external hard drives or cloud. Storage accounts. Eric's obsessive about backups. Detective Chen made a note. We'll be thorough. In situations like this, people often keep evidence they should destroy, thinking it gives them leverage. After she left, the temporary command center we'd established in the conference room continued operating at full tilt. Henry and Vanessa huddled over financial documents, identifying which payments were most critical if the bank granted limited access to our accounts. My parents worked the phones, reaching out to longtime customers and suppliers to explain the situation and request patience. I stepped out for a moment of quiet, finding myself in the workshop. The familiar sounds and smells wrapped around me, like a comforting blanket. Despite everything happening in the offices, work continued here. Carlos and his team were putting the finishing touches on the Henderson dining set, a masterpiece of cherry wood with subtle maple inlays. It's beautiful, I said, running my hand along the grain. Carlos nodded, applying a final coat of oil to bring out the wood's natural luster. Best work we've done all year. Thought it might be good for morale to focus on something special today. You were right. I watched the other craftspeople moving with purpose through their tasks, their focus unwavering despite the company's uncertain future. Thank you for rallying, everyone. Wasn't just me. When word got around about what Eric did, about how you stood up to him to protect the business, people made up their own minds. He set down his cloth and faced me directly. You know what? The difference is between you and Eric. Besides the fraud? I asked dryly. He saw furniture as product. Units to ship, numbers on a spreadsheet. You see what we really make here. And what's that? Pieces of people's lives, Carlos said simply. The table where a family shares meals for decades. The cradle that holds 3 generations of babies. The desk where someone writes a novel or builds a business. He gestured toward the workshop at large. Everyone here knows you understand that. It's why we're staying. A lump formed in my throat. I don't know if we can save it. The company. Not with frozen accounts and public accusations. Maybe. Not. But we'll go down swinging if we have to. He picked up his cloth again, returning to his methodical work. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are bad. When I returned to the conference room, Daniel was waiting by the door. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Just for a minute. I nodded, leading him to the small break room adjacent to the workshop. It was empty at this hour, the coffee pot gurgling as it brewed a fresh batch. I've been thinking about those emails, he said once we were alone. The ones Eric fabricated. What about them? They don't just implicate me in the fraud. They paint a picture of me as ambitious, ruthless, willing to sacrifice Mitchell's long-term reputation for short-term gain. He poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one toward me. That's not who I am, but it's exactly who Eric is. I took the coffee but didn't drink. You think he projected his own motivations onto you? I think he revealed exactly how he views business ethics, how he justified what he did. Daniel leaned against the counter. And I think that might be useful when building a case against him. The insight was perceptive. I'll mention it to Detective Chen. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. There was so much to say, yet neither of us seemed ready to dive into the deeper waters of trust and betrayal. I'm going to stay at my brother's for a while, Daniel finally said. Give you the space you need. My brother Michael lived across town, far enough for meaningful separation, but close enough for Daniel to remain involved in resolving the company crisis. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. His expression was resolute. You need room to process everything without me hovering, trying to fix it. And I need to prove, with actions rather than words, that I'm committed to making this right. The gesture surprised me. Daniel typically avoided conflict, preferring to smooth things over quickly rather than allow emotional wounds time to heal properly. This demonstrated a deeper understanding of what I needed. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded, picking up his coffee. I should get back. Henry wanted my help reconstructing the original financial projections for the expansion, before Eric manipulated them. As he reached the door, I called after him. Daniel? He turned. I believe you, about not knowing what Eric was really doing. I just need time to trust that belief. Relief washed over his face. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. The workday stretched into evening as we established a crisis management plan. Vanessa coordinated with TechCore on the server logs. Henry secured limited release of funds for essential operations. My father drafted a press statement addressing the fraud allegations head-on, naming Eric as the sole perpetrator and describing the company's cooperation with law enforcement. Around 8 o'clock, just as exhaustion was setting in, Vanessa's phone rang. Her expression brightened as she listened, quickly putting the call on speaker. I've got Marcus from TechCore, she announced. He has something. Ms. Foster? A voice crackled through the speaker. We've completed our analysis of the server logs. Those emails purportedly between Mr. Foster and Mr. Wilson, they never passed through your company's mail server. Not sending, not receiving, nothing. A collective exhalation of relief filled the room. We can definitively state their fabrications, Marcus continued. What's more, we found something else. Someone attempted to access your server remotely multiple times over the past month, using administrator credentials. The access was granted, but our system flags unusual login patterns. Eric, I breathed. He must have gotten the admin password somehow. Can you tell what he accessed? Vanessa asked. Email archives primarily, Marcus replied. He was downloading old legitimate correspondence between himself and Mr. Foster, probably to help create convincing forgeries. This was exactly what we needed. Concrete evidence that the emails were fabricated, that Daniel hadn't been complicit in Eric's schemes. We're preparing a full forensic report, Marcus added. Should be ready by morning. Will that timeline work for your legal team? It's perfect, Vanessa confirmed. And Marcus? Thank you. This could save the company. As the call ended, a cautious optimism spread through the room. We weren't out of danger. The accounts were still frozen, the public allegations still circulating, but we had our first solid piece of exonerating evidence. My father squeezed my shoulder. We should all go home, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. One by one, people gathered their things and departed. Daniel lingered, clearly waiting to ensure I was okay before leaving for my brother's house. I can drive you home, he offered. I shook my head. I'm staying here tonight. There's a sofa in Dad's office, and I want to be on site early tomorrow when the forensic report comes in. He seemed about to protest, then thought better of it. Call if you need anything at all. After everyone left, I locked the showroom doors and wandered through the darkened displays. Each piece represented hours of craftsmanship, a tangible expression of Mitchell's values. The thought of losing all this, not just the business, but the legacy, the community we'd built, was unbearable. In my father's office, I settled onto the leather sofa, exhausted but too wired to sleep. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. This is just the beginning. Mitchell's will burn, and you'll watch it happen. Attached was a photo of what appeared to be customer records, design, specifications, proprietary techniques, internal documents that represented decades of Mitchell's institutional knowledge. The implied threat was clear. Eric had company secrets, and he was willing to release them to competitors if we pursued charges. I forwarded the message to Detective Chen with shaking hands, adding, "Just received this threat from Eric Wilson. He has stolen company intellectual property and is threatening to release it." Her response came quickly. "Do not engage or respond. Adding corporate espionage to potential charges. Warrant being executed at his residence now." I set the phone. Aside, a new wave of anger washing over me. Even now, when he'd been exposed, when his schemes had fallen apart, Eric was still trying to destroy what my family had built. Still trying to exercise power he had no right to claim. The office door creaked open, startling me. Carlos stood in the doorway, a thermos in hand. "Thought you might still be here," he said, offering the container. "My wife's chicken soup," she insisted. I accepted gratefully. "You should be home with your family. Just dropped by to check the humidity in the drying room." He glanced at my phone, which still displayed Eric's message. "More trouble?" "Nothing we can't handle," I said, tucking the phone away. "But thank your wife for me. This is exactly what I needed." After he left, I sipped the richly flavored soup, feeling its warmth spread through me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles in the war Eric had declared. But tonight, this small kindness reminded me what we were fighting for. Not just a business, not just a legacy, but a community built on mutual respect, on craftsmanship, on doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, on creating something meant to last. I stretched out on the sofa, wrapping myself in the throw blanket kept there for late working nights. As exhaustion finally overtook me, one thought provided comfort. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. Not as the broken family Eric had tried to create, but as the stronger one forged in the fire of his betrayal. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing persistently on the side table. Disoriented, I fumbled for it in the dim light of my father's office. The digital clock on his desk read 5:37 a.m. "Hello?" My voice was rough with sleep. "Megan, it's Detective Chen. Sorry to call so early, but I thought you'd want to know immediately. We executed the search warrant at Eric's residence last night." I sat up, instantly alert. "Did you find anything?" "Everything." Her voice carried a note of satisfaction. His laptop contained drafts of the forged emails, along with templates he'd created using legitimate correspondence between himself and your husband. We also recovered multiple external drives containing Mitchell's proprietary information. Relief flooded through me. "So you have proof the emails were fabricated?" "Absolutely conclusive proof. But there's more." She paused. "We also found documentation related to similar schemes he'd executed at 2 other family businesses before joining Mitchell's. In both cases, he engineered financial crises, then positioned himself to take control during the resulting chaos. This confirmed what we'd suspected. Eric's betrayal of Mitchell's wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. Has he been arrested?" "That's why I'm calling." "He wasn't at his residence last night. According to his wife Natalie, he packed a bag and left shortly after your confrontation yesterday morning. We've put out an alert, but..." "He's running," I finished for her. "It appears that way. We've frozen his personal accounts and flagged his passport, but he had a significant head start." I thanked Detective Chen for the update, promising to come to the station later to review the evidence they'd recovered. After hanging up, I sat in the growing morning light, processing this new information. Eric's flight was both a relief and a complication. On one hand, his absence removed his immediate threat to Mitchell's. On the other, without him in custody, we couldn't completely close this chapter and move forward. I showered in the small bathroom adjacent to the workshop, changing into the spare clothes I kept at the office for emergencies. By 6:30, I was reviewing the forensic report from TechCore that had arrived overnight, confirming what Detective Chen had told me about the forged emails. Carlos arrived shortly after, surprised to find me already working. "You need to get a life outside this place," he said, setting a paper bag on the desk. "Maritza sent breakfast burritos. She's worried you're not eating properly." I smiled, gratefully. "Your wife is an angel. And as for getting a life, let's save the company first, then worry about my social calendar." As we ate, I briefed Carlos on the developments with Eric. His expression darkened at the news of the previous schemes at other family businesses. "I always thought something was off about him," he said. "Too slick, you know, like he was always performing." "My father saw what he wanted to see," I replied. "We all did, to some extent. Except you, apparently." Carlos shrugged. "When you've worked with wood for as long as I have, you learn to spot veneer pretty quickly." He gathered our wrappers, standing to leave. "Think we'll get access to the accounts today? Suppliers are starting to call about payments." "Henry's meeting with the bank at 9. With the evidence we have now, they should release the freeze, at least partially." After he left, I called my parents to update them, then Daniel. He answered, on the first ring, sounding as though he'd been awake for hours. "I heard from Detective Chen," he said immediately, "about Eric. I can't believe he ran." "I can," I replied. "It's consistent with everything else he's done. creating damage, and then avoiding consequences. I feel like such a fool for not seeing through him sooner. The self-recrimination in Daniel's voice was painful to hear. He fooled all of us, Daniel, even Dad, who's known him longer than any of us. But I'm your husband. I should have protected you, not enabled someone who wanted to harm you and everything you care about. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in me. Despite everything, there was no attempt to minimize his role or deflect responsibility. "Are you coming in today?" I asked, changing the subject. "If you want me to," he replied, careful not to presume. "We need all hands on deck. Henry's meeting with the bank, and I'm hoping we'll regain access to our accounts. When that happens, we'll need to prioritize payments, reorganize production schedules, recalibrate our entire operation. I'll be there in 30 minutes, he promised. By 8:30, the office was humming with activity. My mother arrived with coffee and pastries for everyone. My father followed shortly after, looking more rested than he had in days. Vanessa joined us via video call, coordinating with TechCore on strengthening our digital security to prevent future breaches. At 9:15, Henry called from First Western Bank with the news we'd been hoping for. "The regional director has lifted the freeze on your operational accounts," he announced. "The capital accounts remain restricted pending their formal investigation, but you can process payroll and vendor payments effective immediately." A collective cheer went up around the conference table. This was our first real victory since the crisis began. "What changed their minds?" I asked. The forensic report from TechCore was compelling, but what really tipped the scales was Eric's flight. The bank sees it as tantamount to an admission of guilt. The mood in the office shifted from desperate defense to cautious rebuilding. Daniel took charge of expediting payments to our most critical suppliers. My father contacted key customers to reassure them about order timelines. My mother worked with Carlos to reorganize the production schedule, prioritizing pieces closest to completion. Around noon, Detective Chen arrived with a flash drive containing copies of the evidence recovered from Eric's devices. We gathered in the conference room as she connected it to the projector. "What you're about to see constitutes evidence in an ongoing investigation," she cautioned. "I'm sharing it with you because it directly impacts your business operations, but it shouldn't be distributed further." The files revealed the full extent of Eric's deception. Folders meticulously organized by scheme, Mitchell's financials modified, contained spreadsheets where he'd systematically altered numbers to create the appearance of declining profitability. Luck's acquisition strategy held correspondence with Jason Keller dating back almost a year, long before Eric had ever mentioned the potential deal to my father. Most disturbing was a folder simply labeled Exit Strategy, which contained detailed plans for what would happen after the acquisition. It included drafts of press releases announcing Eric's appointment as CEO of Mitchell's under the Lux umbrella, complete with quotes from my father expressing confidence in Eric's leadership. "He had every step planned," my father said softly. "Right down to words he'd put in my mouth." Detective Chen nodded grimly. "This level of premeditation is why we're pursuing maximum charges. When we apprehend him, he'll face multiple felony counts, including fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and now fugitive status." "What about the other companies he targeted?" Daniel asked. "You mentioned there were 2 previous incidents." "We've contacted authorities in those jurisdictions. They're reopening investigations based on this new evidence." After Detective Chen left, we sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of Eric's betrayal still sinking in. "I keep asking myself when it started," my father finally said. "When he first joined us, or if he came in with this agenda from the beginning." "Does it matter?" my mother asked gently. "It matters to me," he insisted. "I need to understand where I went wrong, how I missed the signs." Daniel spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "You missed the signs because Eric knew exactly which buttons to push. He presented himself as the solution to problems you were already worried about. Industry changes, digital competition, succession planning. My father looked startled. How did you know those were my concerns? Because they're what he used on me, too, Daniel admitted. He knew I worried about Mitchell's future, about ensuring your legacy continued. He positioned himself as the modernizer, the one who could bridge traditional craftsmanship with contemporary business practices. I watched my husband as he spoke, seeing him with new clarity. His betrayal had been real, his mistake serious. But it had come from a place of genuine concern for the family business, manipulated by someone who expertly identified and exploited vulnerabilities. We all wanted to believe him, I acknowledged. Even me at first. He was charismatic, confident, seemingly successful in his previous ventures. It wasn't until I saw how his strategies affected our quality that I started having doubts. Quality, my father repeated, nodding slowly. That's what I lost sight of. Not just in our furniture, but in how we conduct ourselves as a business, as a family. The conversation was interrupted by a call from Henry, still at the bank. His expression over video was grave. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "I've been reviewing the complete loan documentation with the bank's fraud team. The $2-3 million loan Eric secured, approximately $1.6 million is missing." Stunned silence fell over the room. "Missing how?" I finally asked. "The funds were dispersed to Mitchell's account, then almost immediately transferred to a series of shell companies before disappearing offshore. The transactions were authorized with your father's electronic signature, but, given what we now know about the forgeries, he stole the money outright," my father said, his voice hollow. "Not just mismanagement or poor investments. Theft." "Yes," Henry confirmed grimly, "and it gets worse. The loan is still valid, regardless of the forgery. First Western is willing to work with us on restructuring the debt, but ultimately, Mitchell's is still responsible for repayment." The implication was clear. Even with the operational accounts unfrozen, we still faced a $2.3 million debt with nothing to show for it. A debt that would hang over Mitchell's like a guillotine blade, threatening everything we were working to rebuild. After the call ended, I stepped out for air, needing space to think. The showroom was quiet, morning sunlight filtering through the windows to illuminate our signature pieces. Each represented countless hours of skilled craftsmanship, generations of knowledge passed from master to apprentice. All of it now at risk because of one man's greed. The bell above the door chimed, and I turned, expecting a customer. Instead, a woman in her early 30s entered, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest. Natalie Wilson, Eric's wife. "Megan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk? Privately?" I led her to the small consultation room where we typically discussed custom orders with clients. Natalie sat rigidly on the edge of a chair, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain, smudged makeup, hair hastily pulled back, yesterday's clothes. "Eric's gone," she said without preamble. "He emptied our joint accounts before the police could freeze them, took his passport. Detective Chen mentioned he wasn't at your house when they executed the search warrant." She laughed bitterly. "No, he was long gone by then. Left me to face the police alone, to explain things I knew nothing about." Her composure cracked. Slightly. Or at least, things I told myself I knew nothing about. The admission caught me off guard. "You suspected?" "There were signs," she acknowledged, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Large cash withdrawals, secret phone calls, files he wouldn't let me see. I told myself it was just business stress, that all entrepreneurs operate in gray areas sometimes. Why are you here, Natalie?" She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small external hard drive. "He kept this in our home safe. The combination is our wedding anniversary, if that isn't ironic enough." She placed it on the table between us. I don't know exactly what's on it, but he was obsessive about backing up his work files. I stared at the drive, hardly daring to hope. Why give this to me? He's your husband. He was my husband, she corrected sharply. The man who cleaned out our accounts and left me to deal with the fallout is not the person I married, or at least, not the person I thought I married. The parallel to my situation with Daniel wasn't lost on me. Both of us had trusted men who betrayed that trust, albeit in very different ways and to different degrees. There's something else, Natalie continued. Something I overheard the night before your family dinner. Eric was on the phone with someone named Jason, discussing contingency plans if the acquisition fell through. Jason Keller from Lux. What kind of contingency plans? I only caught fragments. Something about a backup investor. Someone who would step in if Lux backed out. Someone who specifically wanted Mitchell's workshop facility and customer list, not the brand itself. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. If Eric had lined up a backup buyer interested only in our physical assets and client relationships, it suggested an even darker scenario than we'd imagined, not just selling Mitchell's to a company that would diminish its quality, but dismantling it entirely, stripping it for parts. Did you catch a name? Any details about this backup investor? Natalie shook her head. Just that they were local and already invested in similar acquisitions. I thanked her for coming forward, assuring her we wouldn't mention her role in providing the drive to the police. As she stood to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it. I benefited from Eric's schemes without asking. Questions I should have asked. That makes me complicit, even if I didn't know the specifics. After she left, I immediately took the hard drive to our IT consultant, who had arrived to strengthen our security systems. He connected it to a secure computer, isolated from our network to prevent any potential malware. Jackpot, he said, as files began populating the screen. This looks like a complete backup of his business activities over the past 3 years. Emails, financial records, contracts, everything. I called Vanessa and Detective Chen, who rushed over to examine the evidence. While they worked, I returned to the conference room where the crisis team was still developing our financial recovery plan. We need $6 million to replace what Eric stole, my father was saying. Without it, the loan payments will cripple our operating budget within months. Various options were being discussed: selling non-essential assets, approaching investors, taking out a second loan to consolidate the debt. None seemed viable without compromising Mitchell's independence or quality standards. What about insurance? Daniel suggested. Does our policy cover employee theft or fraud? Henry shook his head. The policy has exclusions for officers of the company, which Eric technically was after the ownership transfer. I've already spoken with the insurer. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly desperate as option after option was dismissed as unfeasible. We had survived the immediate crisis only to face a potentially fatal long-term threat. Maybe we should reconsider some kind of partnership, my father finally said, the words clearly paining him. Not with Lux, but with a more aligned company. Someone who respects what Mitchell stands for. No, I said firmly, entering the room fully. We're not giving up any part of Mitchell's, not after everything we've done to save it. All eyes turned to me. Do you have another solution? My mother asked gently. Maybe. I took a deep breath. Natalie Wilson just brought us an external drive containing all of Eric's business files. Our IT consultant is going through it. Now with Detective Chen and Vanessa. If it contains what we hope, it might give us leverage we didn't have before. Hope flickered across tired faces around the table. Before anyone could respond, Vanessa burst into the room, tablet in hand. You're going to want to see this, she said, connecting the device to our conference room display. We found correspondence between Eric and someone named Victor Hargrove about acquiring Mitchell's assets if the Lux deal fell through. The name dropped like a stone in still water. Victor Hargrove was a notorious property developer known for buying historic buildings, evicting tenants, and converting spaces to luxury condominiums or high-end retail. He'd been systematically redeveloping the warehouse district where our workshop was located. Hargrove has been trying to buy our workshop property for years, my father said, stunned. I always refused to sell, even when he offered well above market value. Vanessa nodded grimly. According to these emails, Eric promised to deliver the property regardless of what happened with Lux. If the sale went through, he'd convince them to liquidate the workshop. If not, he had a backup strategy to force Mitchell's into bankruptcy, allowing Hargrove to acquire the assets at auction. The betrayal cut even deeper than we'd realized. Eric hadn't just been trying to profit from Mitchell's, he'd been actively working to destroy it if his primary plan failed. Can we use this against Hargrove somehow? Daniel asked. Prove he was conspiring with Eric? That's where it gets interesting, Vanessa replied, a hint of triumph in her voice. Hargrove was careful in his written correspondence, but Eric wasn't. He kept recordings of their phone conversations. She played a clip, and Hargrove's distinctive voice filled the room. I don't care how you deliver the property, Wilson. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, family dispute, it's all the same to me. Just make sure that workshop ends up available, and I'll make it worth your while. $2 million on top of whatever Lux pays you. Off the books, naturally. The recording continued, detailing how Hargrove had similarly acquired 3 other properties in the district through manufactured financial crises at family-owned businesses. This is extortion? My father said, stunned. Conspiracy. At minimum, Vanessa agreed. And extremely damaging for someone of Hargrove's public profile if it became known. The implication hung in the air. We now held leverage that extended beyond Eric to one of the most powerful developers in Portland. Are you suggesting we blackmail Hargrove? My mother asked, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. Not blackmail, Vanessa clarified, but a properly structured settlement agreement with confidentiality provisions in exchange for him covering the losses Eric created? That's entirely legal. It was a morally complex solution, but potentially our only viable option for addressing the financial hole Eric had left us in. I don't like it, my father admitted. Using threats, even justified ones, goes against everything Mitchell stands for. Then don't think of it as a threat, I suggested. Think of it as accountability. Hargrove conspired with Eric to destroy a legitimate business for his own profit. He should make restitution for that, whether it's public or private. Daniel had been quietly contemplating the situation. What if we approach Hargrove not just about covering the stolen funds, but about a legitimate partnership? The recordings give us leverage, but also an opening for negotiation. Partnership? My father echoed skeptically. With someone who tried to destroy us? Not the kind of partnership Eric was arranging, Daniel clarified. Something that actually benefits Mitchell's. Hargrove owns multiple properties in the warehouse district. What if, instead of taking over our workshop, he helped us expand into a larger facility, one that could accommodate both increased production and a dedicated training center for new craftspeople? The idea was unexpected but intriguing. Mitchell's had outgrown our current workshop years ago, but relocation costs had always been prohibitive. A woodworking academy, Carlos mused, warming to the concept. We've talked about formalizing our apprenticeship program for years. Hargrove gets the positive publicity of supporting traditional craftsmanship and vocational training, Daniel continued. We get a solution to our space constraints and a way to ensure Mitchell's techniques are preserved for future generations. And the stolen money? Henry asked practically. That becomes Hargrove's investment in the new venture, Vanessa suggested. Properly documented, above board, and tax deductible for him as a business expense. It was an elegant solution. that transformed a crisis into an opportunity, not just recovering what Eric had stolen, but potentially launching Mitchell's into a new chapter that honored its traditions while expanding its impact. It could work, my father acknowledged, caution still evident in his tone. But Hargrove is notoriously aggressive in business dealings. Why would he agree when he could fight us in court? Because litigation is public, Vanessa pointed out. These recordings would damage his reputation with historic preservation boards, neighborhood associations, and city officials, all relationships he needs for his development projects. And because the alternative we're offering is actually attractive, I added. He still gets the property he wants, just not in the way he planned. And he gets to rebrand himself as a champion of traditional craftsmanship rather than another developer destroying local businesses. Energy and hope began replacing the despair that had permeated the room minutes earlier. My father stood, decision made. Set up the meeting with Hargrove, he instructed Vanessa. But make it clear we're coming with both carrot and stick. I want him to understand that while we prefer a mutually beneficial arrangement, we're prepared to pursue all legal options, if necessary. As the room buzzed with renewed purpose, Daniel caught my eye across the table. In his expression, I saw not just relief at the potential solution, but pride. In me, in Mitchell's resilience, in our collective refusal to surrender what mattered most. For the first time since discovering Eric's betrayal, I allowed myself to believe that Mitchell's would not just survive this crisis, but emerge stronger for having weathered it. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours, built on the same principles of quality, integrity, and craftsmanship that had defined us from the beginning. The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity as we prepared for the meeting with Hargrove. Vanessa worked with Detective Chen to determine which evidence could legally be leveraged in negotiations without compromising the criminal case against Eric. Henry developed financial projections for the proposed woodworking academy. Carlos and the workshop team created preliminary designs for an expanded production facility. Throughout it all, I observed Daniel working tirelessly, offering insights without dominating, supporting without overstepping. It was a delicate balance, being present without presuming forgiveness, contributing without seeking credit. His actions spoke louder than any words of apology could have. As evening approached, most of the team departed, leaving just my parents. Daniel and me in the conference room reviewing our strategy for the Hargrove meeting scheduled for the following morning. I think we're as prepared as we can be, my father finally said, gathering his notes. Let's get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion complicating matters. My mother kissed my cheek as they prepared to leave. Will you be okay? She asked quietly, glancing at Daniel. I'll be fine, I assured her. I'm going to stay a bit longer to review the financial projections once more. After my parents left, Daniel lingered uncertainly. Do you want me to stay and help with the projections? He offered. I considered the question, weighing my need for space against the practical reality that Daniel's financial acumen would be valuable for this task. Actually, yes, I decided. And afterwards, maybe we could get dinner. Talk about things other than the business crisis? Surprise and hope flickered across his face. I'd like that. We worked side by side for another hour, fine-tuning the numbers for tomorrow's presentation. The familiar rhythm of collaboration reminded me of better times, of the partnership we'd built over years before Eric's interference. Remember when we used to do this in college? Daniel asked, noticing my small smile. Late nights in the business school computer lab, running projections for hypothetical companies? Except this isn't hypothetical, I replied. And the stakes are considerably higher than our final grades. True. He set down his pen. But the principle is the same. Identify the problem, analyze the options, create a solution that works for all stakeholders. When did you get so wise about business solutions but miss something as obvious as your brother's manipulation? The question emerged more sharply than I'd intended. Daniel didn't flinch from it. Because business problems are external. They don't involve emotion or family ties or the complicated psychology of someone I've known my entire life. He paused. I've always been better at analyzing spreadsheets than people. It's why we make a good team. You see what I miss? The honesty of the assessment struck me. Daniel wasn't making excuses, just acknowledging a truth about himself that had made him vulnerable to Eric's manipulation. I should have trusted your instincts, he continued quietly. When you first expressed concerns about Eric's strategies, about the quality issues, I dismissed them as resistance to change rather than recognizing the warning signs you were picking up on. I closed my laptop, deciding the projections were as ready as they would ever be. Let's get that dinner. I'm starving. And this conversation deserves better than stale office coffee. We walked to a small Italian restaurant a few blocks from the showroom, one we'd frequented in better days. The familiar setting provided neutral ground, neither the charged atmosphere of the office nor the intimate space of our home. Over pasta and a bottle of Chianti, we cautiously navigated the new landscape of our relationship. We spoke of practical matters first. Daniel's temporary living arrangement at his brother's, coordinating schedules for the coming days, logistics of the Hargrove negotiation. Gradually, the conversation shifted to deeper waters. I keep thinking about trust, I said, tracing the rim of my wine glass. Not just between us, but throughout the company. How fragile it is, how quickly it can be broken, how much work it takes to rebuild. Daniel nodded, understanding the subtext. And whether it can ever be fully restored once it's damaged. Yes. I don't have an answer for that, he admitted. I can only show day by day through actions rather than words that I'm worthy of that trust being rebuilt. He took a sip of wine and accept that it might never be the same as before. His acceptance of this difficult truth touched me more than any promise or plea could have. This was the man I had married, thoughtful, honest, willing to face difficult realities without flinching. I miss you, I said simply. Even while I'm still angry, even while I'm processing everything that's happened, I miss you. He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand but leaving his own within reach. I miss you too. More than I can say. I closed the distance, interlacing my fingers with his. It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely. But it was a beginning. A small bridge across the chasm Eric had created between us. One day at a time, I said, echoing my mother's earlier wisdom. One day at a time, he agreed. Outside the restaurant, the city lights reflected in puddles from an earlier rain shower. Daniel hailed a cab for me, maintaining the boundaries we'd established despite our tentative reconnection. Get some rest, he said as the taxi pulled up. Tomorrow we face Hargrove. I nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the day's adrenaline was fading. What about you? Heading to Michael's? Actually, I'm going back to the office for a while. There's something in the files from Eric's drive that's been bothering me, a discrepancy in the timeline that might be important for tomorrow's meeting. Even now, he was thinking ahead, preparing, trying to protect Mitchell's from any unexpected complications. Despite everything, his commitment to the company, to my family's legacy, remained unshaken. Don't stay too late, I cautioned. We need you sharp tomorrow. He smiled slightly at the implication that he was still essential, still part of the team fighting for Mitchell's future. I won't, just a couple of hours. As the cab pulled away, I watched him walk back toward the showroom, shoulders straight with renewed purpose. Whatever happened with Hargrove tomorrow, whatever the ultimate outcome of Eric's betrayal, I knew one thing with growing certainty. The foundation that truly mattered, the one built on values stronger than Eric's deceptions, remained intact. Mitchell's would survive, and perhaps day by day so would we. Morning light filtered through the showroom windows as I arranged the presentation materials for our meeting with Victor Hargrove. The glass conference table reflected the polished wood samples we'd selected: cherry, walnut, maple, tangible representations of Mitchell's legacy and craftsmanship. Each piece told a story of sustainability, of trees harvested at their prime, of wood dried and prepared with patience rather than expedience. Vanessa arrived first, impeccable in a charcoal suit that projected both competence and authority. She reviewed our negotiation strategy one final time. "Remember, we lead with the partnership proposal," she advised. "The recordings are our leverage, but not our opening move. Let Hargrove see the opportunity before he feels the pressure." My father nodded, adjusting his tie nervously. In 40 years of running Mitchell's, he'd faced countless business challenges, but none quite like this. Negotiating with someone who'd conspired to destroy everything he'd built. "What if he walks?" he asked. "What if he calls our bluff?" "Then we release the recordings to the district attorney," Vanessa replied simply. "And to the press. It wouldn't recover the money Eric stole, but it would ensure Hargrove faces consequences alongside him." My mother placed a steadying hand on my father's shoulder. "Robert, we've built this business on integrity. Whatever happens today, that doesn't change." Daniel arrived moments later, carrying a file folder and looking oddly energized despite having worked late into the night. "I found something," he said, setting the folder on the table. "Something big." Before he could elaborate, the showroom door chimed. Our receptionist appeared in the conference room doorway. "Mr. Hargrove has arrived. He's brought his attorney." I exchanged glances with Vanessa, who nodded slightly. We'd anticipated this. "Show them in," my father instructed, squaring his shoulders. Victor Hargrove entered like a man accustomed to commanding rooms. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. In a suit that probably cost more than our monthly lease, he surveyed the conference room with calculating eyes. His attorney followed, a sharp-faced woman whose expression revealed nothing. "Mitchell?" Hargrove acknowledged my father with a curt nod. "Interesting invitation. Your lawyer was rather vague about the purpose of this meeting." "Please sit." My father gestured to the chairs arranged across from us. "We have a business proposition that might interest you." Hargrove settled into a chair, his attorney beside him. "I'm listening." My father began our prepared presentation, outlining the concept for an expanded Mitchell's facility that would include both increased production capacity and the woodworking academy. He spoke of preserving traditional craftsmanship while creating jobs and training opportunities for a new generation of artisans. Throughout the presentation, Hargrove remained impassive, offering neither encouragement nor dismissal. His attorney took occasional notes, but otherwise maintained the same inscrutable expression. "So you're proposing a partnership," Hargrove said when my father concluded. "You want me to provide a new facility and investment capital for this expansion. What exactly do I get in return?" "Community goodwill," my mother suggested. "Association with a respected brand that's been part of Portland for generations." Hargrove's laugh was short and dismissive. "I'm a developer, Mrs. Mitchell. Not a charity. Goodwill doesn't appear on balance sheets." "Tax incentives do," Daniel interjected smoothly. "The Woodworking Academy would qualify as a vocational training program, eligible for significant tax benefits. Additionally, the property we're proposing for the new facility falls within an opportunity zone, providing further tax advantages for investment." This caught Hargrove's attention. His eyes narrowed slightly as he reassessed Daniel. "And Mitchell's brings what to this partnership exactly? A name? Some outdated woodworking techniques?" "A proven business model," I countered, refusing to be baited by his dismissive tone. "Established customer relationships with some of the most affluent households in the Pacific Northwest." A reputation for quality that can't be bought, only earned over decades. Hargrove leaned back, fingers steepled. Interesting, but insufficient. The numbers don't justify the investment you're proposing. It was time for our next card. Vanessa opened her laptop, turning the screen toward Hargrove. Actually, we've prepared a detailed financial projection. As you can see, the return on investment over 5 years is quite compelling, particularly when factoring in the tax benefits Mr. Foster mentioned. Hargrove's attorney leaned in to examine the figures, whispering something in his ear. His expression remained unchanged, but something in his posture shifted subtly. These projections assume continued growth in demand for handcrafted furniture, he observed. A risky assumption in today's market. Not as risky as you might think, Daniel replied, opening the folder he'd brought. These are the results of a market analysis conducted by Westridge Consulting last year. Eric commissioned it when proposing expansion to First Western Bank, but buried the findings when they didn't support his narrative. He slid the report across the table. Demand for authentic, sustainably produced furniture has increased 27% in our target demographic over the past 3 years. The mass market is struggling, yes, but the high-end niche where Mitchell's operates is actually expanding. Hargrove's attorney picked up the report, scanning it quickly before passing it to her client. A flicker of genuine interest crossed his face before he masked it. Compelling, he conceded, but still not enough to justify the capital outlay. You're requesting. You need to sweeten the pot, Mitchell. My father glanced at Vanessa, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time for our leverage. We're also prepared to offer something else of value, my father said carefully. Discretion. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Hargrove's eyes narrowed to slits. Meaning? Meaning we're aware of your arrangement. With Eric Wilson, I stated plainly. The plan to force Mitchell's into bankruptcy so you could acquire our property at auction. The $2 million offered off the books if he delivered what you wanted. Hargrove's face remained impressively composed, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. His attorney placed a cautioning hand on his arm. These are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence to support them? Vanessa tapped her laptop, and Eric's voice filled the room. So we're agreed then? If Lux backs out, I tank Mitchell's financials. You step in when the bank forecloses. Hargrove's distinctive reply followed. Just make sure that workshop ends up available and I'll make it worth your while. $2 million on top of whatever Lux pays you, off the books naturally. I watched Hargrove's face as his own voice incriminated him. The composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing cold fury beneath. Turn that off, he ordered. When the recording continued, he slammed his palm on the table. I said turn it off, Vanessa complied, closing her laptop with deliberate calm. There's approximately 40 minutes of similar recordings, Mr. Hargrove. Eric Wilson was thorough in documenting your discussions. Where did you get those? Hargrove demanded. Wilson assured me our conversations were confidential. Eric's wife found his backup drive, I explained. She was understandably upset after he emptied their accounts and abandoned her. Hargrove turned to his attorney, who was already scribbling notes. This is entrapment, illegal recording, inadmissible in any court. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings, Vanessa corrected smoothly. As long as Eric consented to the recording, which he clearly did since he made them, they're perfectly legal and admissible. You're blackmailing me, Hargrove said flatly. No, my father replied. We're offering you a choice, a legitimate business partnership that benefits everyone involved, or public exposure of your attempt to destroy a family business for personal gain. The investment we're requesting happens to match the amount Eric Wilson stole from Mitchell's, money that disappeared right after meetings with you. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. We believe you already have the money. That was stolen from us. Hargrove's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. His expression darkened. then gradually shifted to one of calculation. "Let's assume, hypothetically, that I'm interested in your proposal," he finally said. "What exactly would this partnership entail? Specifically, how much control would I have over operations and decision-making?" "None," my father stated firmly. "You would be a financial partner and property developer only. All business operations, quality standards, and brand decisions would remain exclusively under Mitchell's control." "Unacceptable," Hargrove dismissed. "I don't make investments without oversight." "Then perhaps we're wasting our time," my mother suggested, gathering her papers as if preparing to leave. It was a calculated risk. Everything in Hargrove's history suggested he wouldn't easily concede control, but the recordings gave us leverage few of his business opponents had ever possessed. "A board seat," he countered. "Non-executive, but with visibility into financial performance and major business decisions." My parents looked to me. Though they still owned the majority of Mitchell's, they were deferring to my judgment in this critical moment. "A non-voting observer position on the board," I offered instead. "Quarterly financial reviews, advance notice of major initiatives, but no direct input on operations, personnel, or quality standards." Hargrove's eyes narrowed as he assessed my counteroffer. "And Mitchell's relocates to my Riverside property? The full workshop, showroom, everything?" "Yes," I confirmed, "provided the facility meets our specifications for proper wood storage, ventilation, natural lighting, and production flow." A tense silence fell as Hargrove considered. His attorney leaned in, murmuring something that made him frown, then nod reluctantly. "I have conditions of my own," he finally said. "First, those recordings never see the light of day, regardless of what happens with this partnership going forward. My attorney will draft an ironclad non-disclosure agreement." "Agreed, with one exception," Vanessa interjected. "The agreement becomes void if you attempt to undermine Mitchell's in any way, directly or indirectly." Hargrove's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Second, I want right of first refusal if Mitchell's ever decides to sell or seeks additional investment. Only for the duration of our initial agreement, 5 years, my father stipulated. After that, Mitchell's retains full freedom to determine its own future. Third, Hargrove continued, my investment is structured as a loan convertible to equity, with appropriate security against Mitchell's assets. This was a sticking point. We needed his capital, but not at the risk of giving him leverage over the company's core assets, particularly if the partnership soured. The loan can be secured against the new equipment and fixtures we'll acquire for the expanded facility, I proposed. But not against Mitchell's intellectual property, customer relationships, or existing production equipment. Hargrove's lips thinned, but after a brief consultation with his attorney, he grudgingly agreed. Final condition: this partnership is announced as a mutual collaboration benefiting the community. No hint of coercion or impropriety. That suits us fine, my mother said. Mitchell's reputation for integrity is one of our most valuable assets. We have no interest in tarnishing it with public accusations. For the first time, Hargrove seemed to truly see her, not just as an accessory to my father, but as a formidable presence in her own right. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that might almost have been respect. Then I believe we have the outline of an agreement, he acknowledged. Our attorneys can work out the details. As Vanessa and Hargrove's lawyer began discussing implementation timelines and documentation requirements, I caught Daniel's eye across the table. His slight smile conveyed both relief and cautious triumph. We'd secured Mitchell's financial future without sacrificing its soul. An hour later, after Hargrove and his attorney had departed with a preliminary agreement in place, we gathered in the showroom, still processing the outcome of the negotiation. Did that really just happen? My father asked, loosening his tie. Did we just turn Victor Hargrove, the same man who's demolished half the historic buildings in the warehouse district, into a partner in preserving traditional craftsmanship? With proper legal safeguards, Vanessa reminded him, and only after he realized the alternative was public exposure and potential criminal charges. Still, it's rather poetic, my mother observed. The developer known for destroying Portland's heritage now invested in preserving it. Daniel remained quiet, his expression thoughtful. When the others moved toward the conference room to begin planning our next steps, I hung back, touching his arm lightly. "That market analysis you found," I said. "It changed the entire dynamic of the meeting. Hargrove respects hard data, even when he doesn't like what it shows." "It was just good luck I stumbled across it," Daniel replied modestly. "Eric buried it in a subfolder labeled Deprecated Research, probably hoping no one would ever find it." "Not luck," I corrected. "Thoroughness. You stayed late going through every file, looking for anything that might help Mitchell's. That matters, Daniel." He met my eyes, understanding the weight behind my words. It wasn't just about the market analysis, but about his commitment to making amends, to protecting what I loved even at personal cost. "Megan! Daniel!" my father called from the conference room. "Henry's on the phone with First Western. They're ready to discuss restructuring the loan now that we have Hargrove's investment commitment." The moment of private connection broke as we rejoined the others, but something had shifted between us, a small but significant step toward rebuilding what Eric had damaged. The remainder of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Henry negotiated favorable terms with the bank based on our new partnership with Hargrove. Vanessa coordinated with Detective Chen to ensure our agreement didn't compromise the criminal case against Eric. Carlos and his team began drafting specifications for the new workshop facility. By evening, exhaustion had set in, but it was tempered by a sense of achievement that had been missing for days. When my father suggested we all go to dinner to celebrate, it felt both earned and necessary, a moment to acknowledge how far we'd come from the brink of disaster. At Riverview, a restaurant overlooking the Willamette River, we claimed a private dining room. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time since Eric's betrayal had been exposed, the conversation didn't revolve exclusively around crisis management. We spoke of the future, the expanded workshop, the training academy, new designs Carlos was eager to develop with additional space and equipment. Daniel sat beside me, close but not presumptuous. When my father raised a toast to Mitchell's next chapter, our glasses clinked, and Daniel's hand briefly covered mine on the table. I didn't pull away. As dessert was served, my father cleared, his throat, his expression suddenly serious. "There's something else we need to discuss, something I've been considering since this whole ordeal began." The table quieted, all eyes turning to him. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Mitchell's," he announced, effective immediately. Shocked silence followed his declaration. My mother recovered first. "Robert, are you sure? This isn't the time for hasty decisions." "It's not hasty," he assured her. "It's overdue. My blindness to Eric's manipulation nearly cost us everything. The company needs leadership that isn't compromised by pride or outdated thinking." "Dad, no one blames you," I began. He held up a hand, stopping me. "This isn't about blame, Megan. It's about recognizing reality. I built Mitchell's from nothing, and I'm proud of that. But somewhere along the way, I became so focused on creating a legacy that I lost sight of what that legacy was supposed to represent." He looked around the table, his gaze settling on me. "You were right all along. About Eric. About the importance of maintaining our quality standards. About everything. You saw what I didn't want to see because I was too wrapped up in the idea of expansion and succession." The weight of his words settled over the table. My father had never been one for public introspection or admission of error. This level of vulnerability was unprecedented. "What are you proposing exactly?" Henry asked practically. That Megan takes over as CEO, my father replied, with me transitioning to chairman of the board, focusing on mentoring and strategic vision rather than day-to-day operations. All eyes turned to me, expectation and uncertainty mingling in their expressions. The offer was simultaneously everything I'd worked toward and completely unexpected in its timing. I need to think about it, I managed, overwhelmed by the sudden shift. This is a huge decision. My father nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. But know that this isn't just about making amends or responding to crisis. It's about recognizing who has truly been carrying Mitchell's spirit forward all along. The conversation gradually resumed around me, but I remained distracted, processing the implications of my father's offer. Daniel leaned close, his voice for my ears alone. For what it's worth, he's right, he said quietly. No one understands the heart of Mitchell's better than you do. No one fights harder for what it stands for. His validation shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but after years of feeling overlooked in favor of Eric, having Daniel, who had once been part of that dynamic, acknowledge my rightful place felt deeply significant. As the evening wound down, my parents departed first, followed by Henry and Vanessa. Daniel lingered, offering to share a rideshare back to our neighborhood. I'm still staying at Michael's, he clarified quickly, but it's on the way to your place. The car ride was quiet, both of us lost in thought after the eventful day. When we reached my house, our house technically, though it hadn't felt like ours since Eric's betrayal, Daniel didn't presume to come inside. Thank you, I said as the car idled at the curb, for everything you did today, the market analysis, supporting my position with Hargrove, just being there. It's the least I could do, he replied. Literally the very least, given my role in all this. You didn't know what Eric was planning. I should have, he insisted. If I'd been paying attention to what mattered instead of getting caught up in his grand visions, none of this would have happened. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in me. Daniel, we've all made mistakes in this. Dad trusted Eric blindly. I saw the warning signs but didn't push hard enough. You signed documents without reading them. The question isn't who made the worst mistake. It's what we do now to fix things. He nodded slowly. What do you think you'll do about your father's offer? It was the question that had been circling in my mind since dinner. I don't know. Part of me has wanted this opportunity for years. But another part feels like it's happening for the wrong reasons, out of guilt and crisis rather than genuine recognition of my capabilities. Does the reason matter if the outcome is right? He asked. Your father may have come to this realization because of the crisis, but that doesn't make the realization itself any less valid. His perspective cut through my tangled thoughts with characteristic clarity. This was what I'd always valued in our partnership, Daniel's ability to simplify complex emotional situations without dismissing their importance. I should go in, I said, reaching for the door handle. Megan, Daniel said quickly, whatever you decide about the CEO position, I want you to know I'm behind you. Whether that means working alongside you at Mitchell's or stepping back if my presence makes things harder for you. The offer of potential sacrifice, of putting my needs above his connection to the family business, wasn't lost on me. It represented exactly the kind of thoughtfulness that had been missing in his blind trust of Eric. Let's not make any more big decisions tonight, I suggested. One seismic shift per day seems like enough. His smile was small but genuine. Fair enough. Inside the empty house, I moved through familiar rooms that somehow felt changed. The living room where we'd hosted Eric and Natalie for dinner countless times. The kitchen where Daniel and I had cooked together, often discussing Mitchell's challenges over chopping vegetables and stirring sauces. The home office where, apparently, Daniel had signed documents that nearly destroyed everything my family had built. Yet despite these painful associations, the house still felt fundamentally mine, ours, in a way Mitchell's sometimes hadn't during Eric's ascendancy. Here, at least, his influence hadn't permeated every corner. My phone rang, startling me from these reflections. The screen showed an unknown international number. Curious, I answered. Hello? Megan Foster? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar but distorted by a poor connection. Yes, who's this? It's Natalie Wilson. The connection crackled. Eric's wife. Ex-wife soon, I suppose. I sat down, suddenly alert. Natalie, where are you? The police have been looking for you. After providing the hard drive, Natalie had apparently disappeared as well, though under less suspicious circumstances than Eric. Switzerland. Her laugh was brittle. Ironic, isn't it? I'm in the country where Eric probably has money hidden, but I'm the one who had to borrow cash for a plane ticket. Are you all right? As all right as anyone can be after discovering their entire marriage was built on lies. The bitterness in her voice was palpable even through the poor connection. But that's not why I called. I have information you need to know. I reached for a notepad. What kind of information? Eric called me yesterday. The revelation sent a chill through. Wait, he called you? Did you tell the police? Not yet. I wanted to understand his angle first. He was desperate. Offered to make things right if I helped him access accounts the authorities haven't found yet. And did you agree? Another bitter laugh. What do you think? The man cleaned out our joint accounts and left me to face the police. Alone. But I played along long enough to get something useful. Which is? He's coming back to Portland tomorrow night. He claims he has leverage that will force Mitchells to drop the charges. Something about your husband that would destroy any credibility the family has left. My grip tightened on the phone. Did he say what this supposed leverage is? No specifics. Just that it involves Daniel and financial transactions from before Eric even joined Mitchell's. He seemed very confident it would change everything. My mind raced through possibilities. What could Eric possibly have on Daniel from before his involvement with the company? As far as I knew, Daniel's financial history was spotless, conservative even. Where is he meeting you? The Harborview Hotel, room 712, at 10 p.m. He thinks I'm bringing paperwork he needs for some offshore account. Natalie, this is crucial. Information for the police. Eric is a fugitive. They need to know he's returning to Portland. I know, she sighed. I'll call Detective Chen after we hang up. But Megan... She hesitated. Whatever Eric thinks he has on Daniel, be prepared. My husband is many things, but he's rarely bluffed when he thought he held winning cards. After ending the call, I sat motionless, her warning echoing in my thoughts. What could Eric possibly have that would be so damaging? Daniel had been transparent throughout the crisis, admitting his mistakes, working tirelessly to help save Mitchell's. If he was hiding something significant, he'd had ample opportunity to come clean during our recent conversations. Unless it was something he thought I already knew. Or something so damaging he couldn't bring himself to confess it, even now. I reached for my phone, then hesitated. If I called Daniel immediately, demanding explanations about unspecified allegations, it would suggest I still didn't trust him despite all his efforts to make amends. Yet keeping Natalie's warning to myself felt like a betrayal of the transparency we'd been working to rebuild. The clock on the wall showed nearly midnight. Whatever decision I made, it could wait until morning when I could think more clearly, approach the situation with the care it deserved. As I finally prepared for bed, one thought kept circling. After everything we'd overcome, Eric's fraud, the frozen accounts, Hargrove's machinations, Would we be undone by something from before this crisis even began? Something Daniel had kept hidden all along? Sleep eluded me as possibilities multiplied in my mind. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows in an irregular rhythm that matched my troubled thoughts. Tomorrow, Eric would return to Portland, believing he held leverage that would save him from consequences. Tomorrow, we would discover whether our fragile reconstruction of trust would withstand whatever revelation he planned to deploy. And tomorrow, I would need to decide whether to accept my father's offer, to take formal leadership of a company still healing from betrayal, still finding its path forward after nearly being destroyed from within. The rain continued, washing the city clean in preparation for whatever the new day would bring. Despite the uncertainty ahead, I found myself increasingly resolute. Whatever Eric had planned, whatever secrets still remained hidden, Mitchell's had already weathered the worst of the storm. We had fought for its survival, rebuilt its foundations, recommitted to the values that had sustained it for decades. Whatever came next, we would face it together, not as the broken family Eric had tried to create, but as the stronger one forged in the crucible of his betrayal. Morning arrived with pale sunlight struggling through rain clouds, matching my uncertain mood. I'd barely slept, Natalie's warning about Eric's return and his alleged leverage against Daniel circling endlessly in my thoughts. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in my hands, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen. Received information about Eric Wilson's planned return. Surveillance team will be in place at Harborview Hotel. Please maintain normal activities today to avoid alerting suspect. So Natalie had indeed contacted the police. At least Eric's return wouldn't catch law enforcement by surprise. But the question remained, what did he believe he had on Daniel that would somehow exonerate him or force us to drop charges? I was still contemplating this when my phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen. "Morning," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral despite my churning thoughts. "Hey," he replied, sounding energized despite the early hour. "I've been working with Carlos on the specs for the new workshop layout. We have some preliminary designs to show you. Any chance you could meet us at the showroom around 9? The normality of the request, the easy collaboration between Daniel and Carlos, felt surreal against the backdrop of Eric's impending return and whatever revelation he planned. "Sure," I agreed. "I'll be there." "Great. And Megan?" He paused. "Have you given any more thought to your father's offer? The team is pretty excited about the possibility of you taking over as CEO." The question caught me off guard. With Eric's threat looming, I'd pushed my father's unexpected proposal to the back of my mind. "Still thinking," I replied honestly. "It's a big step." "Of course. No pressure," Daniel assured me. "See you at 9. After hanging up, I wrestled with whether to mention Natalie's call. Detective Chen had advised maintaining normal activities, but keeping Daniel in the dark about accusations that directly involved him felt wrong. Yet, raising the issue without specifics might only create unnecessary tension before we even knew what Eric was claiming. I decided to wait until after meeting with Carlos and Daniel. Perhaps seeing them working together, focusing on Mitchell's future, would provide clarity on how to handle Eric's impending return. The showroom was already bustling when I arrived. The closed for renovation sign we'd placed on the door during the crisis had been replaced with "Open by appointment," a small but significant step toward normalcy. Inside, several craftspeople were rearranging the display floor, creating space for new pieces that had been completed despite the tumult of recent days. Carlos and Daniel had set up in the design studio, large sheets of drafting paper spread across the table between them. They were so engrossed in their discussion they didn't notice me at first. "If we position the finishing area here," Daniel was saying, pointing to a section of the drawing, "it gets northern light through these windows without direct sun that could affect the stain application." Carlos nodded approvingly. And keeping the machine shop separated by this storage area helps with dust control. Smart. I don't want to interrupt this meeting of the minds, I said, making my presence known. They looked up. Carlos with a wide smile, Daniel with a more measured one that still reached his eyes. "Megan, perfect timing," Carlos exclaimed. "We've been redesigning the entire production flow for the new facility. Come see." For the next hour, I lost myself in their vision for Mitchell's future workshop. They'd clearly spent hours thinking through every detail, from lumber storage optimized for proper aging to workstations designed for apprentice training alongside master craftspeople. The layout honored traditional woodworking processes while incorporating thoughtful modern efficiencies. "This is incredible," I said finally, genuinely impressed. "When did you two find time to develop all this?" Daniel came back after dinner. "Last night," Carlos explained. "Found me finishing up the Henderson buffet and asked what my dream workshop would look like. We got to talking and..." He gestured at the plans. One idea led to another. I glanced at Daniel, who shrugged modestly. Couldn't sleep. Figured it was better to do something productive. The simple statement carried weight I suspected Carlos didn't fully grasp. Daniel hadn't been able to sleep either, but while I'd lain awake worrying about Eric's return, he'd channeled his restlessness into creating something positive for Mitchell's future. "We should show my father," I suggested. "Where is he?" "Meeting with Vanessa and Hargrove's attorney downtown," Daniel replied. "Finalizing the partnership agreement. Your mother went with them." "Then it's just us today," I realized. With my parents away and everyone else focused on their specific tasks, this might be my best opportunity to tell Daniel about Eric's return privately. Carlos rolled up the plans. "I should get back to the workshop. We're finishing the Palmer commission today, and that burl veneer needs my personal attention." After he left, Daniel and I found ourselves alone in the design studio. Through the glass walls, we could see the showroom floor where life was returning to normal, one small step at a time. "Daniel," I began, deciding directness was best. "I need to tell you something. Eric is coming back to Portland. Tonight." His expression shifted from confusion to shock. "What? How do you know?" "Natalie called me last night from Switzerland. Eric contacted her, trying to enlist her help accessing hidden accounts. She pretended to cooperate but informed me and the police instead." Daniel sank into a chair. "They're going to arrest him?" "That's the plan. He's meeting Natalie at the Harborview Hotel tonight." "Good," he said firmly. "It's time he faced consequences for what he did to Mitchell's, to all of us." I hesitated, then decided he deserved to know everything. "There's more. Natalie said Eric claims to have leverage against you, something from before he joined Mitchell's that he believes will force us to drop the charges." The color drained from Daniel's face. For a heart-stopping moment, his reaction seemed to confirm my worst fears, that there was indeed something significant he'd been hiding. "Daniel?" I prompted when he remained silent. "Is there something I should know?" He stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "I need to show you something. Not here." "What are you talking about?" "Please, Megan. This isn't a conversation for the office. Can we go somewhere private?" The urgency in his voice set off alarm bells. Whatever Eric had on Daniel, it was real, and significant enough to visibly shake my normally composed husband. "My parents' house," I suggested. "They won't be back until later this afternoon." 20 minutes later, we sat at my parents' kitchen table, the space where countless family dinners had unfolded, including the fateful one where Eric had first revealed his plans for Mitchell's. Daniel had barely spoken during the drive, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Whatever this is, just tell me," I said, when the silence became unbearable. "Whatever Eric thinks he has on you, we'll face it together." Daniel took a deep breath. 8 years ago, before Eric joined Mitchell's, I made a terrible mistake. A decision that could have destroyed everything if it had come to light. My stomach tightened. What kind of decision? Mitchell's was struggling during the recession. Orders had fallen almost 40%, and the bank was threatening to call in our line of credit. Your father was doing everything possible to avoid layoffs, including deferring his own salary. I remembered that difficult period vividly. I'd been handling operations, watching craftspeople I cared about worry about their futures while trying to maintain morale and quality under increasingly stressful conditions. I was reviewing the company financials, Daniel continued, trying to find any way to extend our runway until orders picked up again. That's when I discovered the Ashworth Trust. The name meant nothing to me. What trust? A small investment account your grandfather established in the 1970s, intended to provide emergency funding for the business during economic downturns. It had been nearly forgotten over the decades, mentioned only in some old corporate documents. Your father asked me to organize. And you used this money to help Mitchell survive the recession? I guessed, still not understanding why this would constitute leverage for Eric. Daniel's expression tightened. Not exactly. The trust had specific conditions for its use: formal board approval, notification of all family shareholders, and mandatory repayment within 5 years. Accessing it properly would have taken time we didn't have, so He swallowed hard. I created a loan document that made it appear the funds were coming from my personal savings. You falsified documents? The irony wasn't lost on me. The very offense for which we were pursuing charges against Eric. Yes, he admitted quietly. I transferred $175,000 from the trust to Mitchell's operating account, documented as a personal loan from me. Your father was incredibly grateful, believed I was putting our family's financial security at risk to save the company. The money kept us afloat until orders recovered. We hired back everyone we'd had to lay off temporarily. The pieces were falling into place, but one crucial element remained unclear. What does this have to do with Eric? 3 years later, once Mitchell's was back on solid ground, I began secretly repaying the trust from my actual savings. I was about halfway through when Eric joined the company. Somehow, I still don't know how, he discovered discrepancies in my personal accounts. Started asking questions about large withdrawals that didn't match our lifestyle. And you told him the truth? I asked incredulously. Daniel looked away, shame evident in his posture. I panicked, thought if I showed him I'd made a mistake, but was rectifying it. He'd understand it was done with good intentions. Instead, he saw it as leverage, I finished for him. Not immediately. At first, he seemed genuinely sympathetic, even offered to help me clean up the paperwork, to protect me if it ever came under scrutiny. It wasn't until he started pushing for more influence at Mitchell's that the subtle pressure began. The revelation landed like a physical blow. All this time, while Eric had been manipulating my father, he'd simultaneously been holding this secret over Daniel. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, the hurt in my voice unmistakable. Even after everything. That's happened these past few days? I convinced myself it wasn't relevant to his current fraud, Daniel explained, that bringing it up would only complicate the case against him and potentially implicate me in similar behavior. And honestly, Megan, I was ashamed. I'd done the very thing we're condemning Eric for, falsified documents for personal gain. Not for personal gain, I corrected automatically. To save Mitchell's. To protect our employees' livelihoods. The motivation was different, he acknowledged. But the action itself, creating false documents, using funds without proper authorization, if Eric reveals this, it undermines our entire case against him, makes us look hypocritical for pursuing charges when I committed similar offenses. The cruel elegance of Eric's strategy became clear. By revealing Daniel's past transgression, he could paint our entire family as engaging in the same behaviors we were accusing him of. The distinction between Daniel's desperate attempt to save the company and Eric's systematic looting of it might be lost in the ensuing scandal. "Is the trust fully repaid now?" I asked, focusing on practical matters while processing this revelation. "Almost. I have about $30,000 left to repay. I've been making monthly transfers from my personal account. And my father never knew about any of this?" Daniel shook his head. "No one did, until Eric." I sat back, absorbing the full implications. The man across from me, my husband of 10 years, had committed fraud, however well-intentioned, and hidden it from me. Had continued hiding it even as we fought to save Mitchells from the consequences of Eric's similar actions. Yet I couldn't summon the anger I knew I should feel. Perhaps because the context was so different. Daniel risking his own freedom to protect Mitchell's employees during a crisis versus Eric systematically stealing from the company to enrich himself. "We need to tell my parents," I finally said, "before Eric can use this against us. And Detective Chen needs to know as well." Alarm flashed across Daniel's face. "Megan, this could result in criminal charges against me. At minimum, it would require restating years of Mitchell's financial records." "I know, but Eric's leverage only works if this remains hidden. Once we disclose it ourselves, control the narrative, it becomes just another obstacle to overcome rather than a devastating revelation." "Your father will never forgive me," Daniel said quietly. "Not after what just happened with Eric. It will look like both of his sons-in-law betrayed his trust." The fear in his voice was palpable, and not without justification. My father's reaction to discovering Eric's deception had been intense. Learning that Daniel had also falsified documents, regardless of motivation, would be another profound blow. "Dad's not the same person he was a week ago," I reminded him. "This crisis has changed all of us, made us reevaluate what really matters." Daniel didn't appear convinced, but he nodded nonetheless. "When do we tell them?" "Today, as soon as they return from downtown." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "We face this together, Daniel. Just like everything else." The gesture seemed to strengthen his resolve. Together. We spent the next hour developing a plan for disclosure, first to my parents, then to Detective Chen, finally to the Mitchells board. Daniel gathered all relevant documentation, creating a timeline that clearly distinguished his actions from Eric's more recent fraud. As we prepared to leave for the showroom, my phone rang. Detective Chen's name appeared on the screen. "Ms. Foster," she began without preamble, "we have a situation developing. Eric Wilson was spotted entering your workshop facility 30 minutes ago." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. His meeting with Natalie isn't until tonight." "It appears that was misdirection. We have officers en route now, but I wanted to warn you directly. Is anyone currently at the workshop?" "The entire production team," I replied, panic rising. "At least 15 people. What would Eric want there?" "Unknown. But given his increasingly desperate actions, we're considering him potentially dangerous. Please stay away from both the workshop and showroom until we've secured the location." After hanging up, I relayed the information to Daniel, whose expression hardened from concern to determination. "Carlos and the others are there," he said, already moving toward the door. "We can't just wait while Eric does whatever he's planning." "Detective Chen explicitly told us to stay away," I reminded him, even as I grabbed my keys. "Then you should follow her instructions," he replied. "But I'm going. Those people are family, Megan. I'm not letting Eric hurt them too." The simple declaration, "those people are family," struck me forcefully. Despite everything, despite his own precarious position, Daniel's first concern was for the Mitchells' craftspeople. Not his reputation, not the legal implications of his past actions, but the welfare of the people who had built Mitchells from the ground up alongside my father. "We're both going," I decided. but we stay in the car until the police arrive. No heroics. The drive to the workshop felt interminable, though in reality it took less than 15 minutes. We parked a block away, police protocol from detective shows guiding our decision to maintain distance. Through the workshop's large front windows, we could see normal activity continuing. Craftspeople at their stations, machines operating, no sign of disturbance. "I don't see Eric," Daniel murmured, scanning the visible portion of the facility. "The lumber storage area isn't visible from here," I pointed out, "nor is Dad's office." We sat in tense silence, watching for any sign of police arrival or disturbance. Within 5 minutes stretched to 10, each second amplifying my concern for the people inside who had no idea a fugitive might be among them. "Something's wrong," Daniel finally said. "The police should be here by now." As if summoned by his observation, my phone rang again. Detective Chen's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "There's been a change in the situation," she informed me. "We have confirmation that Eric Wilson is not at your workshop. The individual spotted was using his access card, but has been identified as Jason Keller from Lux Furnishings." "Keller? Why would he have Eric's access card?" "We're investigating that now. It appears Mr. Wilson may have deliberately misled his wife about his return to create confusion. We're recalibrating our search efforts, but I wanted you to know, the workshop is not at risk." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by renewed concern. If Eric had fed false information to Natalie, knowing she would share it with us and the police, what was his actual plan? After ending the call, I turned to Daniel. "It wasn't Eric. It was Jason Keller from Lux using Eric's access card somehow." Daniel frowned. "That makes no sense. Why would Keller be at our workshop? Lux publicly distanced themselves from any acquisition talks after Eric's fraud came to light." "I don't know, but Detective Chen says they're investigating. The workshop is safe, at least." We were about to leave when Daniel's phone buzzed with a text message. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he read it. "It's from Eric," he said, showing me the screen. "He wants to meet. Just me, no police. Says if I don't come alone, he'll release everything he has about the Ashworth Trust to the media immediately." The message included an address in North Portland, an industrial area far from both the workshop and showroom. "It's a trap," I said immediately. "He's trying to separate you from everyone else. Get you alone." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But what choice do I have? If he exposes what I did before we have a chance to disclose it ourselves, the damage to Mitchell's reputation could be irreparable. We need to tell Detective Chen. And risk Eric following through on his threat? No." Daniel's resolve was evident in his posture. "I created this vulnerability by falsifying those documents years ago. I'm not letting it hurt Mitchell's now." "So what? You're just going to meet with a desperate fugitive by yourself? That's insane, Daniel." "No more insane than what we've been dealing with all week." He squeezed my hand. "I'll be careful. Keep my distance, stay near exits, but I need to at least try to contain this situation before it explodes." Part of me wanted to physically restrain him, to prevent him from walking into what was almost certainly a dangerous confrontation. But another part recognized the determination in his eyes, the same determination I'd seen when he stayed late reviewing files, when he challenged Hargrove during negotiations, when he imagined a better workshop with Carlos. 30 minutes, I finally conceded. "If I don't hear from you within 30 minutes of you arriving at that address, I'm calling Detective Chen." "Fair enough." He leaned across the console, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I love you, Megan. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide about the CEO position or our marriage or anything else, I just needed you to know that." Before I could respond, he was out of the car, walking toward his own vehicle parked further down the street. I watched him drive away, fear and frustration warring within me, for about 15 seconds. Then I started the engine and followed him. There was no way I was letting Daniel face Eric alone, regardless of what either of them wanted. I maintained a careful distance, grateful for Daniel's distinctive silver sedan that made him easy to track through traffic. The address Eric had provided led to a half-abandoned industrial complex that had once housed small manufacturing businesses before they relocated to cheaper facilities outside the city center. Daniel parked in front of a weathered brick building with faded signage for a cabinet maker long since closed. I continued past, finding a spot behind a dumpster that concealed my car while providing a clear view of the entrance. 5 minutes passed before another vehicle approached, a nondescript rental car that stopped beside Daniel's. Eric emerged, looking nothing like the polished businessman who had so confidently announced the Lux acquisition just days earlier. His designer suit had been replaced by jeans and a hoodie, his normally perfect hair disheveled, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. Daniel got out of his car, maintaining a cautious distance as they exchanged words I couldn't hear. Eric gestured toward the building, clearly wanting to continue their conversation inside. Daniel hesitated, then followed, disappearing through the rusted metal door. The moment they were out of sight, I texted Detective Chen. Eric Wilson at 4370. North Harbor Industrial Way. Meeting with Daniel now. Please send officers immediately but discreetly. Wilson believes Daniel came alone. Her response was immediate. Units en route. ETA 8 minutes. Do not approach or engage. 8 minutes felt like an eternity with Daniel alone inside that building, with Eric, whose increasingly desperate actions suggested a man with nothing left to lose. I debated following them in, but caution prevailed. If Eric saw me, he might react unpredictably, potentially endangering Daniel more. Instead, I crept closer to the building, finding a dust-covered window that offered a partial view of the interior. Through the grime, I could make out Daniel and Eric standing in what had once been a manufacturing floor, now empty except for scattered debris and a few abandoned workbenches. Their body language told a story even without audio. Eric animated, gesturing emphatically. Daniel more contained, maintaining space between them while responding with measured words. Neither appeared physically aggressive, suggesting some kind of negotiation rather than confrontation. I strained to hear anything through the cracked window, but caught only fragments. Recordings, trust, family, nothing providing clear context for their discussion. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, movement at the far end of the street caught my attention. 2 unmarked police vehicles approaching slowly, lights off to avoid alerting those inside. Relief washed through me at their arrival, followed immediately by concern about how Eric might react when cornered. I texted Detective Chen again. They're inside the main building. Large open space, no visible weapons. Eric appears agitated but not violent. Her response was a simple, acknowledged. The police positioned themselves strategically around the building, communicating via hand signals. Detective Chen approached me directly, her expression professionally neutral but eyes conveying understanding of my presence despite her earlier warning. We'll handle this carefully, she assured me quietly. 4 officers are taking positions at all exits. Once in place, I'll enter with my partner through the main door. Your husband is not our target here. I nodded gratefully, relieved by her explicit recognition that Daniel wasn't being treated as a criminal despite his meeting with a fugitive. They've been talking for several minutes, I informed her. It seemed tense but not physically threatening. Good. That gives us... Her words were cut off by the sound of breaking glass from inside the building, followed by raised voices. Without hesitation, she signaled her team, who moved immediately toward their assigned positions. Stay here, she ordered me firmly before advancing toward the entrance, weapon drawn but held low. The next moments unfolded with disorienting speed. Police officers breached the building from multiple points simultaneously. Shouts of, "Police! Don't move!" echoed through the cavernous space. Through the window, I glimpsed Eric backing away. From the advancing officers, Daniel several yards distant with his hands raised to show he posed no threat. For a heartbeat, it appeared the situation was under control. Eric cornered, Daniel safely separate from him, officers maintaining a careful perimeter. Then Eric reached into his hoodie pocket. "Gun!" an officer shouted, though from my angle, I couldn't confirm whether Eric was actually armed. Daniel lunged forward, not toward the officers but toward Eric, his intention clear even from a distance, to prevent whatever desperate action his brother was contemplating. "Daniel, no!" I screamed, though he couldn't possibly hear me through the closed windows and commotion inside. Several things happened simultaneously. Officers advancing with weapons raised. Daniel reaching Eric. Eric's hand emerging from his pocket holding something I still couldn't identify. They collided in a chaotic tangle of limbs, falling behind. A concrete pillar that obscured my view of the outcome. I broke from my position, running toward the entrance despite Detective Chen's explicit instructions to stay put. An officer moved to intercept me, but Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Let her through. That's her husband in there." Inside, the scene was one of controlled tension. Officers maintained positions around the fallen men, weapons still drawn, but not firing. As I moved closer, the tableau became clear. Daniel had tackled Eric to the ground, pinning him face down with surprising effectiveness for someone with no law enforcement training. "He's not armed," Daniel was saying breathlessly. "It's just a flash drive." He was reaching for a flash drive. Sure enough, a small black device lay on the concrete floor where it had fallen during their struggle. Detective Chen approached. Cautiously, securing the object, while another officer handcuffed Eric despite his continued immobility under Daniel's weight. Once Eric was properly restrained, Daniel released him, backing away as officers took control. Only then did he notice my presence, eyes widening in a mixture of surprise and concern. "Megan? What are you doing here?" "Exactly what you did," I replied, unable to keep a slight tremor from my voice. Refusing to let someone I care about face danger alone. As officers led Eric away, reading him his rights, Daniel moved to my side. His expression shifted from residual adrenaline to dawning comprehension. "You followed me." "Of course I followed you," I confirmed. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. I should have known better. Detective Chen approached us, Eric's flash drive sealed in an evidence bag. "Mr. Foster, we'll need a formal statement about this encounter and your communications with Mr. Wilson leading up to it." "Of course," Daniel agreed. "And Detective, there's something else you should know. Something about my own past actions that Eric was using as leverage." I squeezed his hand supportively as he briefly outlined the Ashworth Trust situation. Detective Chen listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. "I recommend consulting with an attorney before making any formal statement about those matters," she advised when he finished. "While your motivation appears substantively different from Mr. Wilson's actions, there are potential legal implications you should understand fully." "I understand," Daniel acknowledged, "but I wanted you to hear it directly from me, not as something discovered during your investigation." She nodded, professional but not unkind. "Transparency is generally the best approach. We'll talk more officially once Mr. Wilson is processed." After she moved away to coordinate with other officers, I turned to Daniel. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen you do." "Tackling Eric?" "Meeting him alone in the first place." Though the tackling was pretty impressive too. His laugh held equal parts relief and lingering tension. "I played defensive line in high school. Some skills you never completely forget." The humor faded as he looked toward the police car where Eric now sat, head bowed. "He wasn't armed, Megan. He never intended violence. He just wanted to make a deal." The flash drive containing evidence about the Ashworth Trust in exchange for us dropping the charges. Would you have agreed? No, he said without hesitation. I told him I was already planning to disclose everything myself, that his leverage was already evaporating. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. That's when the police burst in, and he panicked. We watched as Eric's police transport departed, red and blue lights reflecting off wet pavement from a rain shower that had begun while we were inside. The weather felt symbolic somehow, washing away the last visible traces of the crisis that had nearly destroyed Mitchell's. We still need to tell my parents, I reminded him, about the trust. I know. He took my hand, his grip firm and steady. But first, I need to tell you something else. Something I realized when I was facing Eric just now. What's that? That I've spent years being the careful one, the responsible one, the one who valued security over risk. It made me vulnerable to Eric's manipulation because I couldn't imagine anyone deliberately jeopardizing their future the way he did. I waited, sensing he was building to something important. But these past few days, watching you fight for Mitchell's, seeing your absolute clarity about what matters, it's changed something in me. His eyes held mine, more open and vulnerable than I'd seen them in years. I don't want to be just the careful one anymore. I want to be brave enough to stand for something the way you do. The simple declaration touched something deep within me. Throughout our marriage, I had sometimes misinterpreted Daniel's caution as lack of passion, his deliberateness as detachment. Now I recognized it as simply a different expression of the same core values I held. You already are, I assured him. You stood up to Hargrove. You confessed to Detective Chen knowing it might have serious consequences. You tackled your own brother to protect everyone in that room. With you beside me, he pointed out. That's the difference. When I'm with you, I'm braver than I am alone. Rain fell steadily around us as we stood in the empty industrial lot, police technicians still processing the scene inside. Despite the grimness of our surroundings, I felt something shift and settle between us. A new understanding, deeper than before. Eric's betrayal had tested the foundations of our relationship. We should go, I said finally. My parents will be back at the showroom by now, wondering where everyone is. Are you ready for that conversation about the trust? I considered the question seriously. I think we've all seen enough secrets and their consequences this week. It's time for complete honesty, whatever comes after. The drive back to Mitchell's felt like crossing a threshold, leaving behind the desperate chaos of Eric's schemes and moving toward whatever our future held, complicated but cleansed of deception. My parents were indeed waiting at the showroom, along with Vanessa and Henry. Their expressions shifted from concern to relief when we walked in, then to confusion when they noted our disheveled appearance and the police officer who had accompanied us to take formal statements. What happened? My father demanded. We've been trying to reach you for hours. Eric's been arrested, I explained simply. And Daniel and I have something important to tell all of you. Over the next hour, Daniel explained everything about the Ashworth Trust, the desperate circumstances during the recession, his decision to circumvent proper procedures to access the emergency funds, his ongoing efforts to repay the money. He omitted nothing, acknowledged every mistake, and accepted full responsibility for his actions. My father listened in stunned silence, my mother's hand gripping his tightly as the story unfolded. When Daniel finished, the quiet that followed felt charged with unspoken judgment. 8 years, my father finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. For 8 years, you carried this secret. Yes, Daniel acknowledged, and I can only ask for understanding, not forgiveness. I did what I thought necessary to save Mitchell's, but I should have been honest about how it was accomplished. My father stood abruptly, walking to the showroom windows to stare out at the rain-slicked street. The tension in his shoulders betrayed the internal struggle taking place. Dad, I said quietly, moving to stand beside him. Daniel kept this secret because he believed he was protecting Mitchell's. Just like you kept the ownership transfer to Eric secret because you thought it was best for the company. He turned to look at me, surprise evident in his expression. You're defending him? I'm putting his actions in context, I clarified. What Daniel did was wrong procedurally, but right in its intention. To save jobs, to keep Mitchell's alive during the recession. What matters now is not the mistake, but how we move forward from it. My father's gaze shifted to Daniel, assessment clear in his eyes. You were prepared to sacrifice your own freedom by meeting Eric today. Vanessa tells me the potential legal consequences for what you did could include jail time. I know, Daniel replied steadily. I've accepted that possibility. Something shifted in my father's expression, a grudging respect replacing disappointment. That took courage. It took too long, Daniel corrected. I should have come forward years ago. The standoff between them gradually softened, neither fully yielding but both acknowledging the complex humanity in the other's position. My mother, ever practical, broke the impasse. What matters now is how we address this legally and financially, she said firmly. The trust must be properly restored with full documentation of what occurred. Henry nodded. I can work with Vanessa to develop the appropriate disclosures and amendments to past financial statements. It will require board approval and potential reporting to regulatory authorities. But with proper framing as a voluntary disclosure, the consequences can be minimized. And the remaining amount to be repaid? My father asked. About $30,000. Daniel confirmed. My father nodded decisively. Mitchell's will cover it. The company benefited from those funds. The company should complete the repayment. The generosity of the gesture wasn't lost on any of us. It represented, if not forgiveness, at least a path forward that acknowledged shared responsibility. As the meeting concluded and our team dispersed to handle their respective tasks, Henry to begin financial reconciliation, Vanessa to coordinate. With Detective Chen, my parents to speak with the board members, Daniel and I found ourselves alone in the showroom. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, late afternoon sunlight breaking through clouds to illuminate puddles on the sidewalk. That went better than I expected, Daniel admitted, watching the play of light through the windows. Dad sees himself in you more than he realizes, I observed. The determination to protect Mitchell's at any cost. The weight of responsibility. I paused, considering. Maybe that's why he was so vulnerable to Eric's manipulation too. Eric presented himself as sharing that same drive. The difference being Eric's only real commitment was to himself. Daniel turned to face me fully. I've been thinking about your father's offer, about you becoming CEO. So have I acknowledged. You should accept, he said firmly. Not because of recent events or your father's guilt or anything else, but because you're the heart of Mitchell's, Megan. You always have been. You understand that it's not just a furniture company. It's a repository of values, of craftsmanship, of doing things the right way even when it's harder. His assessment touched me deeply, articulating what I'd always felt but rarely heard, acknowledged so directly. What about you? I asked. If I become CEO, where does that leave us? Professionally, I mean? Wherever you want it to, he replied. If having me at Mitchell's complicates things for you, I'll step away. Find something else. But if you think I can still contribute, still help build the future we've been imagining these past few days, the expanded workshop, the training academy, then I'd like to stay. The absence of ego in his offer, the willingness to prioritize Mitchell's well-being and my professional authority over his own position, confirmed what I'd been coming to understand. Throughout this crisis, Daniel's mistakes had been real, but so was his commitment to making things right. I want you there, I said decisively. Mitchell's needs your financial expertise now more than ever. But more importantly, I need your perspective. Your caution balances my impulses. Your thoroughness catches what I might miss in my enthusiasm." Relief and gratitude flickered across his face. "Partners, then?" "Partners," I confirmed, "in every sense." The moment was interrupted by Carlos entering the showroom, excitement evident in his rapid stride. "Megan, Daniel, you have to see this," he exclaimed, gesturing for us to follow him to the workshop. There, gathered around a workbench, stood the entire production team. On the bench lay what appeared to be a scale model of the expanded workshop, facility Daniel and Carlos had designed just that morning. "They've been working on it all day," Carlos explained proudly. "A surprise, to show support for the new direction." The model was extraordinarily detailed. Miniature workstations arranged precisely according to the plans, tiny tools carefully positioned, even diminutive lumber stacks in the storage area. It represented hours of collective effort by people who had every reason to focus solely on their regular tasks given the tumult of recent days. "This is..." I struggled to find words adequate to express my emotion. "This is Mitchell's," Daniel finished for me, understanding exactly what I meant. "The real Mitchells. Not just furniture, but people who care enough to create something like this." The craftspeople gathered around beamed with pride. One of the youngest apprentices stepped forward shyly. "We wanted you to know we're all in," she said. "Whatever comes next, the new facility, the training program, all of it. We believe in this place." My throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you, all of you, for sticking with us through everything." "Family sticks together," Carlos said simply, echoing his words from days earlier, "even when things get tough." In that moment, surrounded by the people who truly constituted Mitchell's heart and soul, I knew with absolute certainty that I would accept my father's offer. Not because of Eric's betrayal, or my father's guilt, or any external circumstances, but because this community, this tradition of excellence, this way of creating something meaningful together, was worth fighting for. Worth leading into whatever future awaited us. 3 months later, I stood in the center of our new workshop facility, watching sunlight stream through carefully positioned skylights onto workbenches where craftspeople both familiar and new practiced their art. The space hummed with focused energy, saws singing through carefully selected lumber, sanders bringing out the natural beauty of wood grain, finishing brushes applying oils that would protect and enhance each piece for generations. The expanded facility had opened ahead of schedule, thanks to Hargrove's surprisingly genuine enthusiasm once he recognized the potential PR value of supporting traditional craftsmanship. The training academy occupied one wing, already filled, with apprentices learning techniques that might otherwise have been lost to time and technology. In the new showroom adjacent to the workshop, my father guided customers through displays with renewed vigor, sharing the story behind each piece, with the passion that had launched Mitchell's decades earlier. My mother had taken on the role of community liaison, organizing open houses that invited the public to witness furniture making firsthand, connecting Mitchell's more deeply to Portland's vibrant artisan culture. Daniel had found his place as, well, developing a financial model that balanced the company's growth with its values, ensuring we remained commercially viable without sacrificing the quality that defined us. His disclosure of the Ashworth Trust situation had resulted in formal reprimands from regulatory authorities, but no criminal charges, thanks to the voluntary nature of the disclosure and Mitchell's immediate corrective actions. And Eric? He had accepted a plea deal that limited his prison time in exchange for testimony against other conspirators, including Jason Keller, who had been orchestrating similar schemes at multiple family businesses targeted by Lux. The story had eventually made national news, positioning Mitchell's as the company that fought back and won, a narrative that, ironically, had increased our visibility and customer base. "Penny for your thoughts?" Daniel asked, joining me in watching the workshop activities. "Just appreciating how far we've come," I replied. 3 months ago, we weren't sure Mitchell's would survive the week. He nodded. following my gaze to where Carlos was demonstrating a complicated joinery technique to 3 wrapped apprentices, from crisis to opportunity. Though I wouldn't want to go through it all again. No, I agreed. Once was quite enough. We walked together through the workshop, stopping occasionally to check progress on various commissions. The Henderson dining set that had been in production during the crisis now occupied pride of place in our showroom, a tangible reminder of the quality we had refused to compromise even in our darkest moments. The board approved the expanded apprenticeship program, Daniel mentioned as we reached my office. A glass-walled space that maintained my connection to the workshop floor rather than isolating me in executive territory. Full scholarships for 5 students annually, with emphasis on recruiting from underserved communities. That's wonderful news. Carlos will be thrilled. We settled into the comfortable seating area I'd created for informal meetings, the antithesis of the formal conference room where Eric had once announced his plans to sell Mitchell's to Lux. There's something else, Daniel continued, his expression shifting to one of cautious optimism. Natalie called from Switzerland this morning. I hadn't spoken to Eric's ex-wife since her crucial warning call months earlier. How is she? Better? Apparently. She started a small interior design consultancy, focusing on sustainable furnishings. He hesitated. She asked if Mitchell's would consider being one of her suppliers. The request surprised me. After everything that happened? I think that's exactly why she's asking. A way to make something positive from the wreckage Eric left behind. Daniel watched me carefully, clearly uncertain of my reaction. I told her I'd discuss it with you. I considered the proposition thoughtfully. Natalie had been a victim of Eric's deceptions too, albeit in different ways than Mitchell's. Her call warning us of Eric's return had been a crucial turning point, potentially preventing worse outcomes. Tell her we'd be open to discussing it, I decided. Not as a favor to her or because of the past, but because it could be a legitimate business opportunity if her design philosophy aligns with our values, Daniel smiled, visibly relieved. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the open door. My father stood there, a rare expression of nervousness on his face. Am I interrupting? He asked. Not at all, I assured him. We were just finishing up the apprenticeship program details. Daniel stood. I should check in with Henry about the quarterly projections anyway. Robert, always good to see you. As he left, I noticed the subtle shift in their interaction, still somewhat formal, but without the tension that had characterized their early interactions after Daniel's disclosure about the Ashworth Trust. Time and shared purpose were gradually healing those wounds. My father took the seat Daniel had vacated, looking around the office with evident approval. You've made this space your own. It felt important to put my stamp on it, I acknowledged. New leadership, new era for Mitchell's. Speaking of which, he reached into his jacket, removing a small velvet box. I have something for you. A tradition I should have continued much earlier. He opened the box to reveal an antique pocket watch, gold case gleaming softly in the afternoon light. This belonged to your grandfather, he explained. He carried it every day at the workshop, used it to time finishing processes, to know when lumber had dried properly, to pace his work. When I took over as CEO, he presented it to me as a symbol of Mitchell's values: precision, patience, the importance of respecting time's role in creating something of lasting worth. He extended the box toward me, eyes bright with emotion. It should have been yours years ago, Megan. I was just too blind to see who was truly carrying forward those values all along. I accepted the watch carefully, feeling its solid weight in my palm. The simple gift represented more than just a family heirloom. It was formal acknowledgement of my place in Mitchell's legacy, not as an afterthought or a secondary figure, but as the rightful steward of everything the company stood for. Thank you, I said simply. knowing he would understand the depth of meaning behind those inadequate words. He nodded, composure regained with visible effort. "You've accomplished more in 3 months than I managed in 3 years. The expanded facility, the training academy, the new client relationships, all while maintaining the quality standards that define us." "I had help," I reminded him. "Everyone stepped up when it mattered most." "Yes, but they rallied around your vision, Megan, your understanding of what Mitchell's could be." He glanced through the glass walls to the workshop beyond, where craft and commerce existed in harmonious balance. "I built this company on craftsmanship, but you're building its future on community. That's something Eric never understood and I only belatedly recognized." The mention of Eric's name no longer carried the sharp pain it once had. Time had transmuted the raw betrayal into something more complex. A cautionary tale, certainly, but also the catalyst for necessary change. "Have you heard from him?" I asked, curious rather than concerned. My father shook his head. "Not directly. His attorney contacted us about the disposition of his forfeited ownership shares, but that's being handled through proper legal channels now." He paused. "Do you think he ever really cared about Mitchell's? Even a little?" I considered the question seriously. I think he cared about what it represented. Success, legacy, stability. But he saw those as ends in themselves, things to be acquired rather than values to be lived. "Unlike Daniel," my father observed. "For all his mistakes, he was trying to protect the company, not exploit it." "Yes," I agreed, pleased by his unprompted acknowledgement of this crucial distinction. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the workshop floor where Carlos was now instructing an apprentice on the proper technique for hand-planing a particularly challenging piece of figured maple. "We're introducing a new line. Next quarter," I mentioned, changing the subject to more forward-looking matters. "Modern designs that honor traditional joinery techniques." Daniel's market analysis shows significant demand among younger professionals who want quality but with more contemporary aesthetics. My father's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You and Daniel came up with this together?" "Along with Carlos and some of the newer craftspeople," I confirmed. "It's been a truly collaborative process." He smiled, genuine pleasure evident in his expression. "That's how the best ideas at Mitchell's have always emerged. Your grandfather and I used to sketch designs together late into the night, each building on the other's concepts." The comparison wasn't lost on me. Despite everything that had happened, Daniel and I had found our way back to that kind of creative partnership. One strengthened rather than weakened by the crucible of crisis we'd endured together. As if summoned by our thoughts, Daniel appeared at the workshop entrance with Carlos, both gesturing excitedly over what appeared to be a new design sketch. Their collaboration, the financial pragmatist and the master craftsman finding common ground, embodied exactly the balance Mitchell's needed to thrive. "Go," my father encouraged, noting my attention shift. "That looks more interesting than reminiscing with an old man." I pocketed the watch, its weight a comfortable reminder of continuity amid change. "Never too old for new ideas, Dad. Come, join us." Together, we crossed the workshop floor, moving toward whatever innovation Daniel and Carlos were so enthusiastically discussing. Around us, Mitchell's hummed with purpose, not just surviving, but evolving, strengthened by the very crisis that had nearly destroyed it. Eric had tried to take over our family business through deception and manipulation. In the process, he had inadvertently forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, to rebuild on stronger foundations, to recognize who and what truly mattered. The contract my husband had signed without reading had indeed shocked everyone. But the ultimate shock had been how resilient Mitchell's proved to be when its true values were threatened. As I joined the animated discussion about the new design concept, grandfather's watch secure in my pocket and family, both blood and chosen, surrounding me, I knew with certainty. Mitchell's finest pieces weren't behind us in some golden past, but waiting to be created in the future we were building together, one careful decision at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out!